They were ready to go.
With anticipation.
So I don't want to waste their time. So I got this gavel, my own money, it's not even taxpayer, so hopefully I don't abuse it. But it already is working, apparently. Natalie, item 1.1, take us away.
I believe that, so this one for the recognition of progress, achievements, and improvements. Actually, can I back up for 1 second? Deputy Jones and Jamie Barrett are up at Public Education Appropriations Committees today. We'll give you a little brief as to what's happened later, but for those of you who weren't aware, I just thought I'd let you know that. For item 1.1, recognition of progress, achievements, and improvements. The last couple of board meetings, we've been having conversations about use of board carryover funds for capital improvements, and Cami is going to give us a quick update as to the status of some of those projects.
I'm actually going to come over here too, so I'm not talking to your heads.
Do we need one of these mics over there?
Oh, I'm loud. You'll be fine. So first I'm going to talk about some of the construction projects that we've got going currently. Right now we're building in administration a board office. We're going to be putting a conference room table in there and about 8 chairs. So as the board comes, if they need a place that they want to sit and work throughout the day or during the day, they're welcome to come to the office and do that. We're also building a new conference room and 2 offices in our HR space. We're going to be moving our AGs over to that space so that they have a little bit more confidentiality. And we just felt like that would be a good mix with HR. We're constructing 2 new offices in the basement on the east side of the building for our UPAC investigators. We'll also be moving Ben down there, and then his 2 additional support staff. I also have costs or prices on any of these if you're interested or want any additional information. We're going to convert this space, the vacant space where internal audit used to be, into 2 additional conference rooms. It seems like we never have enough conference room space. So we'll be doing that and then adding technology in both of those rooms. So we'll have the TVs and the air media so that we can hook up. Everybody just seems to really like that, and it's really needed here in our office. As you can see, we have fantastic audio in this room. So one of our technology upgrades will be to upgrade the system here so that we can set up the room on either side. Right now we're limited to just this area because that's where we have microphones and the ability to pick that information or that sound up. And that actually will be coming out of the $600,000 capital improvement dollars that was approved by the board. We felt like that shouldn't come out of your technology budget that you approved because this is used by lots of different people. We're also going to be doing an audio system in the board overflow, which is just north of the boardroom, putting a TV in there so that when we're at full capacity in the boardroom, we have places for people, the public, to come and see. Finally, with technology, we've had a vendor come in and kind of take a look at our building. Our current camera system and security system is very antiquated and probably not sufficient for what we need. We've had them come in and kind of design what we think would be an effective security system. That will go out for RFP, and then we'll be looking at upgrading to about, 35 cameras versus the 14 that we have currently. Something that's a higher technology and better quality. That one, they gave us kind of an estimate of around $85,000. Just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that so there weren't any surprises or any concerns. And if there are, if you'll just let us know now, we'll look at different options. But any concerns about that?
No, that's great.
Okay.
Let's do it soon. But just random, I was just walking in. We have this huge sign saying caution icy conditions with these 4 antiquated light bulbs.
It's really pretty when it's turned on too.
It's right in front of my office, so I kind of think that might be a warning. So.
That was installed many, many years ago to inform people when they come in. Our parking lot turns into basically an ice skating rink in the winter when it doesn't flow well. It just turns into ice puddles. Mm-hmm. We've had several additional superintendents since then that don't like it, and we'll probably end up taking that out.
Why don't we put a little capital? But it's just not a very welcoming
right
It's just so,
So cute.
it looks circus 1970s era.
Right.
I-
We agree, and I think it's pretty obvious when you pull into the parking lot when it's icy, so, yes, we will be taking that out. Some future projects, just so you're aware, and we've talked about relocating that receptionist desk in the main hallway down to the other end of the hallway where our public comes in. That does include, we will need to take out some of the load-bearing walls and install some steel structures there so we have a waiting area. That will happen in mid-March. That's out on RFP right now. We'll also be installing parking arms in the parking lot so that people have to have a validation sticker in order to get back out, which will really help with our parking issue. We are going to be reconfiguring the space in IT to make that more collaborative. As we go around and make changes in the office, we're trying to lower cubicles and make it brighter so that people are, more open and collaborative. And finally, we have a couple of DFCM funded projects. They'll be replacing the sidewalks and our handrails outside that are rotting out. And then they're doing a VAV upgrade where they'll change out all of the units and then all of the valves in the ceiling. So, but those are funded by DFCM. Those will be funded by our agency. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
Fantastic.
We'll look forward to it. We want a very welcoming environment here for our public here. Item 1.1, I think we're still on it, right, Natalie?
I believe that's all we have for 1.1.
What's all we have for 1.1? Okay. Item 1.2. You have our attention, Natalie. Board member salary.
So I believe that, did you come to speak to this one?
I can participate, Ms. Dave Thomas
Oh,
rewrote
okay.
that, so.
I believe the purpose of this, in your packets, there's a Utah code reference and also a policy. Utah code was changed last year to increase the amount of board member salaries and make it commensurate to what the legislature makes, and requires us to designate what meetings are covered under that policy. So I believe Lorraine is prepared to make some comments.
Dave commented. It actually was 2016 when that was changed, so this is like our second year of this new policy. So we just thought there was a few things that need to be tweaked. There's been some questions from the board, and so Assistant Attorney General Thomas rewrote the policy. There have been some changes, and then we consulted together on that, so.
What we did is that we took the, and again, this is a policy, this is not a rule, and so this is a matter for self-regulation of the board, but what we did is we took the statute and tried to track as carefully as we could the language of the statute and put it into the policy. The most important matters that we have to determine is what meetings were going to be covered by this salary provision, and probably most important is the authorized meetings that would be authorized by the board to determine whether or not they would be covered. So that's what we put in here, and those are the issues that we have tried to address.
Anyone have questions? Linda, please.
So, my question is on the authorized part. I wonder if we need to be a little more clear about what exactly that means. I assume that means that the board has, first of all, it's a board committee, right? It's not an external committee. It's a committee the board has created, right? It's a task force the board has created. Is that true?
And I think the answer to that is yes.
Yes, so it's a task force the board has created and has authorized these people, the full board has authorized these people to be on.
That's correct.
Because we have subcommittees of committees, but that would not be covered by this?
That could be covered by this. It's a matter of
And
whether or not,
that's why I think we need
whether or not the
clarification.
board has authorized them.
If you look at 4C on that, it talks about the board designating other authorized meetings, and C is as funding allows for a board member assigned to board task force or other board committee meeting is authorized by the board. So that is a change. That used to be the chair that authorized that, but statute says board, so we changed that to board, but there really needs to be a process for determining that? If it's the board, then that's,
Yeah, and see, and that's
Gotta
my,
be done in
that's
board
my
meeting.
question, you know, is that clear enough? Because when I was law and licensing chair, we had 3 or 4 different subcommittees that I would put people on. Now, the board knew about those because we'd take them to the board and say we were gonna set up these subcommittees. So are those subcommittees, would they fit under this or not?
They could.
See, and that's the question.
They could, but again, it's a matter.
How subjective is it gonna be?
Well, no, it's not gonna be subjective at all. This is gonna be the matter of the board will then authorize those and determine whether or not those are gonna be covered. So you can certainly make a recommendation from law and licensing that is to a subcommittee, that it would go forward and be authorized, and then it would be up to the board as to whether or not it would be authorized within the budget that's established for that area.
I love going to meetings, but I love them more when I'm paid for them. And I'm always excited when they pass around that piece of paper, and I'm like, oh, yay, I'm getting paid for it. But it's always a surprise to me. So I would like to have more clarification, just as Board Member Hanson. This is not clear. I mean, I think that if we're going to be asked to do something, we should be like, this falls under this category, or falls under that category, or it's not in these categories at all. So either we can have that conversation when we create these subcommittees, or we can put them in here somehow. But as we create, like, you know, right now I'm on an RFP, I'm like, I don't know if that fits in there. I really can't tell. I don't know if I'm getting paid for that or not. And then I'm also on another committee. I don't even know if it fits in there. So if I'm part of the process right now and I can't understand where I fit in this, I don't think it's very clear. So as we create these committees, maybe we should determine which area they fit in. So if we said, we are creating a subcommittee that fits onto the board policy of 3.3 pursuant of, you know, whatever this is, and say that's that, then that would be easier for us to determine what goes with it. Does that make sense?
Mark?
Well, it does, as long as everyone kind of remembers exactly, oh, was that or wasn't that? Because it's not listed out here, and this is where the gray and the confusion come from, is what is and what isn't. But you're right, it would go to, there would be a reference that Lorraine would track, saying, yep, it's in here now, and that is. But then the other challenge is on the ones that aren't reimbursed, and that's still where the problems.
No, as far as the clarity is concerned, you know, you say, right now, what we've done is we've put in those that are considered to be, again, the different categories are, that these are considered to be meetings of the State Board of Education. That is one that is authorized, that's one that is permitted under the statute. The second one is those that are authorized. Now, right now, what we do and what we'll need to do is to make sure that as each one of these committees are created, that it then goes back to the board to be, quote, authorized. And then, you know, we could keep a laundry list of those that have been authorized, and that would be certainly what Lorraine would do as far as is within the minutes and with the note as to which ones have been authorized. And then, you know, then if you want to have a clearinghouse for a list to say whether they're in or out. But right now, what we need to do is the board needs to actually weigh in and determine which ones are going to be authorized or not.
Well, Linda and Kathleen.
So I think that's pretty awkward for the board to set up a subcommittee and then send it to the board. It has a couple of people on and say, okay, are we gonna pay these 2 people or not? I think that's an awkward situation for the board to be in, to be talking about 2 specific people who've been put on a committee and are we gonna pay them or not? I just think it's too, like I said, it's not clear enough. If they fit into those specific categories, and we can say, well, we're going to pay them because of this or that or the other because they fit this. But if it's just, you know, well, we're going to authorize them or we're not, it's not clear enough to determine.
Hold on, Kathleen and then Dave.
I think by adding a category in here that is not a paid position is fine. I mean, I have no problem saying, I would love to do that. And you said, hey, it's category 4. I'm like, that's okay. I can totally do that. I mean, just state that this is a category 4 position, and we'll kind of learn the difference between 3 and 2 or 4 and 5. And
Yeah,
that'll be easier for us and say, are we gonna establish this as a 4 position or a 3 position? And I don't think that'll determine whether or not we're gonna do it. I mean, for somebody it might, but, I mean, I do like to know ahead of time. It's not like, oh, yay, so I think that would alleviate some of the questions.
And I think one of the limitations that we have is that the way the statute is written is that the board has to do this. Before, these were designated by leadership or by the chair, but the statute very clearly says the board has to do this. So when you say that it can be very awkward, it very well could be awkward, but I'm afraid that that's the mechanism that has been provided in the statute.
I'm happy to disclose right here, right now. I made $6,006 on my W-2 for my state school board service in 2017. I didn't attend as many meetings as other board members, I agree. But, I mean, I guess I'm somewhat curious. Are we budgeting as much as state legislators? Like, you know, I think they get paid $17,000, $18,000 a year. Are we budgeting that much in the budget? Because it would seem a cleaner policy might just be to say, you get the same amount for every board authorized meeting, boom, end of story. I mean, if the money's there, why are we afraid to pay state school board members for their service? Because I think we aren't. I mean, the legislators are earning triple what we are, from what I can see. Dave?
Now, there is also in the statute, and that is again for the salary, is that we could just have a flat salary for the year.
That'd be interesting.
That is permitted within the statute, but we've now drafted this to try to focus on those meetings that were attended and how attendance would be.
Okay, I'm gonna go Natalie and then Linda.
I think to kind of go back to the budgetary question, yes, the board does have funding in their budget to provide salaries, to provide stipends, to provide reimbursements. Depending upon which board member is attending a meeting, it's not just the attendance costs. Sometimes we have travel and mileage associated with those. I think, at least from my perspective, one of the benefits of having a policy like this, maybe with more clarity or an additional procedure, is that at any given time we may be required to answer a grammar request or disclose what it is that our board members are compensated for. I believe we had to do that this year, and having a clear designation of what the board has authorized payment for and what the board has not authorized payment for is required. Oftentimes, right now, during the fiscal note process or during the legislative session, there are a few new committees that are being proposed to be created. And board members are members of those committees, staff are members of those committees, and we're asked to indicate whether we feel the board has enough money in their budget to pay those compensation costs for these new committees that are created. Obviously, none of those things occur without passing legislation, but we do calculate the board's budget based on what the authorized or established meetings are. We go through the regular schedule. When we're looking at the budget to determine if we think we're okay or not, which I believe we feel we're fine, right? We're not worried about that. Having a framework of what to expect. We know when committee meetings are going to occur. We know when board leadership meetings occur. You know, we can kind of estimate out what those are. I think that's really the intent of the framework of this policy, is to set the groundwork, the floorwork. If the board wanted to have an additional process where you designated these extraneous committees or these one-time things or these short-term things through a different process, those would fit nicely within C. You could also have a category that said these things specifically are not paid. The issue is if you put things in the list that are not paid and then the board decided to pay them, that would be an issue. And so I think this was left broad to allow the board to have some flexibility depending upon funding. If you had a lot of money and wanted to pay everyone for the RFP committee, and if board members were assigned to be on the RFP committee by board leadership, that would fall under an authorized, is that correct?
Yeah.
And I think that helps give Lorraine some guidance and some coverage when she's making those decisions to follow a policy.
Linda and Lorraine?
And so Dave, back to what you said, I understand that the board authorizes, but I would like some better criteria. So the only criteria we have is Kathleen sitting on this committee. Are we going to pay her? You know what I mean? We need to know, is it a legislative committee? Was it created by the board? You know, was it approved by the board? All of those things could be criteria so that we can put something in a specific category and that we don't, it's not so broad that we can't decide.
Okay. Lorraine, and then I think we're going to let Mark speak for a while, because I'm very interested in what Mark has to say. You will get a long time. Mark.
Oh, I'm patient, I'm
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna indicate what process is now. We have a policy in place now. This is a change from the policy. Right now, on those other committees, the board chair basically decides. As a person that administers that, I'm the one always saying, is this a committee we're paying for? And right now, the policy allows for the board chair to make that decision. As we relooked at the statute, it said the board determines those meetings. So that's why there's a difference, but anything would make it more clear for me, because I am the one that has to administer it, would be very helpful.
Sure.
A couple things. You made the comment that were earlier, I just want to address, Chair Wright, about being afraid to pay something. We've never been afraid, and Lorraine's never afraid to pay anything. I as a chair, I've never been afraid to pay something. But what we've wanted to be is consistent and be fair and reasonable and still stay conservative. And some of this, there's been inherited practices of conservatism where a lot of things we didn't, because people weren't asking, they weren't expecting to be reimbursed because it was the dollars, it's not why they signed up for this. But it's been over the last year, it's been, a lot of concern has come forward of, well, how come I don't get paid for, I'm doing this one, how come I don't get paid for this other one? And all these questions are coming up. So this is part of a good evolution. The reality that I'm seeing in here is, as paymasters, we're responsible for reimbursement and that. You know, I learned this a long time ago. There's two poor paymasters, one that pays too soon and one that doesn't pay at all. And we, as chair, and I also going to speak for Lorraine, we don't want to be either one of those, but we want to be consistent. That's why we're having this discussion here, is don't make it on all of that burden on to be placed just with one person, which is the chair, to make the determination on what's being fair and reasonable, because it should be the board, like we are seeing in this policy. Somebody's going to say yes, no, and that needs to be, I'm still coming back, that needs to be the board saying, hey, this is where we're at on the reimbursement. The other part of this is, as stewards of the budget, our budget has been so small compared to everything because of all of our reimbursements. We're still conservative, ready for audits, there's justification behind it. But moving forward on this and being consistent on the reimbursement, there is no question in my mind that our spending will go up to be fair, reasonable, and consistent with all of the stakeholders. So where I'm at is I don't have any problem at all with this policy and taking it to the board, the decision on compensation to the board. So it's board approved, we check the box, we come over to Lorraine still pass the paper around, making sure we validate our presence to the meetings and all of the different meetings, and it will simplify this process. And then on budgeting, we can make assumptions on how many of these committee meetings and that we're going to attend, and we can make sure we can stay in the budget instead of being ultra conservative and probably not being fair and reasonable and consistent with everybody else on what's happening. And so I'm very much in favor of this policy. The way this policy is put together, we definitely can govern ourselves on this particular issue. If we tighten it up, I think tighter than this, I think it's gonna cause us some grief. So I think they've done a really good job at putting this together, simplify things, it brings consistency. So that's where I'm at. I don't have much more I'm not gonna complain.
I think Chair Huntsman has been very transparent in how it is done, but I think maybe, hearing Kathleen and Linda, and even my experience, it still seems that it's highly discretionary and somewhat unknown, which is good in some ways, but in other ways, kind of, we don't know. So I think this is my idea. Maybe ask leadership and staff to go back and bring this back in 1 month and add to this policy, as of, February 2018, these meetings are paid at this level. These meetings are paid not or at this level. And then anything that's added in the future will be, put in one of these categories. So thus we have in writing where we are now. And then we take that to the full board. And do we bring it back to Finance Committee, Kathleen and Linda, or do we just send it right to the full board?
I think it would be good to bring it back to Finance Committee, and that's what I think too. I think Lorraine can probably sit down and say, well, there are these categories of meetings, and so I think that's a great suggestion, Joel.
Mark, Kathleen, what do you think of that?
I think that's a great idea. I think it's also kind of, would be better for us to know, like, hey, we have this committee, we would like somebody to sit on it, it's non-stipend. Would you be willing? And you're like, yeah, okay. But I think that, and I've been a part of other associations where people that live close to the epicenter of what's going on actually attend more meetings and kind of volunteer their time, which is completely okay. But it would be nice to have something that's a little bit more clear. And it doesn't have to be in here to speak to what Mark was saying, because then it would cause us to have more scrutiny. Just stating it ahead of time, this is a non-stipend meeting, this is a stipend meeting. I mean, that's simple, and it doesn't have to be in code. It's just, you know the rules, and you can just tell us right then, and then you know where you're at, I guess.
I think we only have 2 board members. It's interesting that live within more than an hour away from our office. I think just Terrell and Michelle right now.
Outside of an hour or inside an hour?
Outside of an hour from here. Oh, and Mark, excuse me.
You keep, I'm here.
Chair
I
anymore,
know.
so we don't.
I'm out of line, but
I know.
I'm
Okay.
I'm the bald guy, that sits by you.
All right, Lorraine, last comment. I think we've decided what we're doing.
Okay, well,
Are you
this
clear?
will come back next time. Maybe this is just,
Mhm.
this is a major change to the policy, so I wanted to point it out, number 7. We haven't allowed members to be paid if they're participating by electronic means or by telephone. And that was a suggestion when we started this by the legislature. They do not do that, and so we kind of followed their policy. But as AEG Thomas and I were talking in these days of allowing electronic meetings, that we should provide a provision for that, so.
Yeah, no, it did seem inconsistent where we had changed our bylaws to specifically allow for electronic participation, and then to say that if you do participate electronically, you don't get the benefits of this. It seemed like that was an inconsistency, and so that we ought to just align those.
Someone who participates electronically a lot, I don't know if I like the incentive structure. Still getting paid for participating electronically. I think it's, when you're participating electronically, all you really are is listening and potentially voting. You're not engaging. I guess I'm kind of okay with how it is. Does anyone else see it differently? Even if it is a bit inconsistent. We'll let someone bring a lawsuit who is participating electronically and isn't getting paid for their state school board meetings. We'll leave it as is and dare
Well,
them.
I would say, one thing I would say is it isn't automatic. The member would have to, by some way, by affidavit, by whatever, still sign something saying, I wouldn't just say you're participating. I can't sign for another person. You have to sign if you're there. You would have to do similar. So it would be up to you if you feel like you've participated enough to be paid for it. It's really up to the member themselves if they want to do that.
Linda?
So I don't come in electronically, so I'm gonna agree with you, Joel, just because you do, and, I rarely do, so.
Okay, I think we're done. Mark?
Well, before we say we're done, I'm just sitting there to move this forward and get closure on it quicker. Right now it's gonna come back with the spreadsheet. I'm wondering what that advantage is to keeping the spreadsheet and this from going to the full board? Why, what are we gonna do with the spreadsheet? How much more hand-wringing are we gonna do? We could move this to the full board with the spreadsheet and then take the appropriate actions in our next meeting and take this off the list.
I'm okay with that. Kathleen?
I don't need a spreadsheet. I think that's extra work. I agree with Mark, board member Huntsman. I think that just the policy of saying you're getting paid, you're not getting paid, is all the clarification that 99% of us are going to need, just ahead of time. And that's already available. So I think that would make it a lot clearer and gives us more discretion to pay or not pay.
The benefit of the spreadsheet that would accompany this would be that in our board meeting, that then people can vote to clean up the spreadsheet, because if this is how it is, they're saying we want this to be different. We want the stipend to be on this committee and that. We can clean it up. We can get that clarity in our next board meeting. We're gonna go there anyway. So we might as well.
Well, and that's my question. It depends on how much cleaning up needs to be done, whether it needs to come back here or, and Lorraine probably knows that better than we do. How much, because if it needs a lot of cleaning up, then it could take a lot of time in board meeting that we could do here and then send it up to them and say, this is our recommendation. So it just depends on how much it needs, I think.
Dave?
Well, the one piece that does need to be cleaned up is that those meetings that are considered to be authorized meetings have to be approved by the board. So something has to go to the board just to solidify that piece. Because up to this point, the board hasn't approved each one of those. Those have been done by the chair or by leadership. We now have a statute that specifically calls for board action. So we have to, we'll need to take it to the board in that fashion.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion.
Natalie wants to come.
Natalie?
Well, that was actually going to be my question, is I've heard lots of ideas and I'm trying to make the pending list of things that we need to do. And so I was hoping that we could get some clear direction before we move off so that we know what you need us to do next month.
Maybe I'll dare to make the motion. I move that we designate which committees are in the level of reimbursement in writing, and simply add that to the existing board policy and take that to the full board for their consideration and potential approval at the March 2018 meeting. And we hope staff and leadership will create that specific list. Lorraine?
My question to that is that I have a list already of what we pay and what we pay for and categorized and everything. You got that actually last month, the chart of what we pay and what everyone's participating in. Do you want the actual list incorporated or as an attachment? Because you wouldn't want to incorporate the list into your policy.
Attachment.
Okay. That was just a clarification.
Natalie?
So the list attached, and then also incorporate in the policy the categories that are currently paid.
Yes.
That's what the motion.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, I agree. Second. So we don't need a second.
We only need a second.
The
Dave?
categories.
When you
So
say
What
categories,
yeah.
we already have categories in, at least 2 categories in there. Are you looking for additional categories?
So like subcommittees or legislative committees or task forces or those kinds of
committees.
At least that's what I'm
Okay.
thinking.
Okay.
All right. Kathleen?
So there are a couple of things where they would just like a board member to participate. That's not legislative, that's not, so what do you call that category? So-
Other.
Huh?
Other.
Okay.
Other duties as
I don't know.
assigned.
Okay,
We'll figure it out.
okay.
Hey, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Took us only 28 minutes. Item 1.3. This is something that I think is really awesome. Natalie.
So I believe the intent of this agenda item is to provide the committee some updates as recent discussion and conversation that's happened in the Public Education Appropriations Committee. The USBA and USSA put forth some recommendations to the Board of Education that the Board of Education ratified and put on their budget request list. A presentation was made in Public Education Appropriations, moving that list forward and presenting it to the Public Education Appropriations Committee. As part of that conversation, and as part of every conversation that happens during the legislative session, this office receives a lot of requests for data and information from the Fiscal Analyst Office. The request for people transportation was to add $5 million to the to-from allocation this year, and to add another $5 million every year for the next 5 years. The Fiscal Analyst Office asked us for an impact. They wanted to know what adding $5 million to that formula would do, what it would look like, and at what percentage all of our LEAs were being paid. That testimony and the conversation that ensued brought up some issues related to, and I don't think that they are necessarily issues, they're policy clarifications that are needed. There is a difference between the way that we calculate the to-from formula allocations and what actual expenditures are for our transportation functions in our LEAs. So our school districts and charter schools, largely school districts are the only ones that participate in to-from. They prepare and submit financial reports to this office every year. The annual financial report is where we pull the to-from activity from. And for all of our school districts, they're reporting total costs in that area. Those total costs include to-from miles, they include non-eligible to-from miles. We're getting more additional data from all of our LEAs pertaining to where individual LEAs are putting activities, capital purchases, all sorts of things. So statute clearly, and we have an agreed upon formula that was worked on by an advisory committee, tells us how we calculate the to-from distribution. We pull in everybody's total expenditures and we exclude a few things. The to-from formula does not pay for the purchase of school buses. It doesn't pay for depreciation. It doesn't pay for routes that don't fall into eligible categories. Our LEAs track a myriad of data points to enable us to filter down through all of that data and precisely extract what we think are eligible miles, eligible minutes, and the costs associated with those. I don't want to get into a lot of detail because I don't think that that's the intent of this conversation. Right now, we take the total costs that are submitted by our LEAs and we parse them into two categories. The first one is related to miles. Miles captures things that basically it captures the maintenance cost of our fleets. So miles cost includes the salaries and benefits of the mechanics or maintenance staff, the garage employees, purchase services, insurance, supplies, which all of that includes things like gasoline, tires, parts, things like that for the maintenance of our vehicles or maintenance of the bus fleets. Minutes captures more the individuals who manage and supervise transportation. So that's the salaries and benefits of our drivers, of the administrators, of the secretaries, the individuals that compile the reports, the trainers. That's pulling in current expenses, trainings, travels. So we parse those expenditures out. There are some categories that don't get included in this total that we calculate for our school districts. We then take an average, and this is really this average concept is really where the differentiation between the percentages, which I'm sure you've all heard about, is coming into play. The formula reimburses our LEAs based on a statewide average. It's intended to create an incentive for the LEAs who are creating the most efficiencies and being the most cost effective as possible. For those who aren't, they don't get reimbursed for some of those decisions. Our LEAs have the autonomy to create bus routes that aren't funded all the time. They do that through either charging a fee to parents or paying for those things with local revenues. They have the ability to create hazardous routes, all sorts of things. Bus students to magnet schools, bus students to dual immersion programs or gifted and talented programs. Those things don't generally fall within the to-from definition, the eligible costs. When we calculated the amount that we are reimbursing our LEAs right now and presented that to the Appropriations Committee, right now everyone is at about an average of 80%. When we allocate what is eligible and then prorate the money that's available, everyone is coming in at about 80%, and that is before adding a base. As the number that was presented by the USBA and USSA committee was calculated, it was calculated based on total expenditures made by our LEAs as a percentage of the allocation they receive. Neither one of those is right or wrong. They're just different methodologies of determining a percentage. And so the policy question that came up as the legislature was evaluating the board's request, which was the same as our LEAs, is to add more money to that formula. Is there a need? And there absolutely is a need this year. There are unreimbursed costs right now in the to-from formula. But as staff, we were asked to determine whether that need would exceed, would the $5 million meet that 85%? Do we need more? How long would it take? Where are the costs living? And right now, we as staff, and I think as a legislative staff, don't know which calculation the legislature wants us to measure. Do we take total costs as a percentage of what's being allocated, which does include some things that aren't eligible, or do we take the formula allocation and use that percentage? That is not a conversation that we've had time to finish. I know that our business administrators have been submitting some data through their representatives. We've had a chance to look at a little bit of that. We're trying to get together and have a quick conversation, hopefully in the next couple of days, before Public Ed Appropriations meets again next week, to try to figure out what a recommendation might be. Again, we've never gotten this close, and so I think that that's a good point to bring out, is that we've never gotten to the point where we've added enough money to actually make it up to the 85%. We've never had to measure this before, and we want to make sure that we clearly determine, someone makes a clear policy call as to what we should be measuring and how we're going to allocate those funds to everyone. And I think that that's what's generated some of the uneasiness, some of the conversation that's happening right now within our LEAs. I think that percentage surprised a few of them. I'm not sure how many people are really aware how the to-from formula works, and so we want to make sure that we do our jobs and provide as much information from our side so that we can come to the same conclusion as our business administrators. That's really kind of where we are at this point. I don't know what's happening right now, but at this point there haven't been any decisions. That recommendation was passed forward to the legislature to add $5 million to to-from. That's kind of the update that I have right now. I don't know if our BA community has any other comments or thoughts they'd like to add.
I'd like to welcome Zane. Why don't you come up? And I just be blunt, Zane, I mean, I've heard from the BA community that you're only getting reimbursed at 65%. Maybe if you could, within your comments, explain why there's such a, that's twice as little, I mean, of the reimbursement. Right. So there's a huge variance here in what's happening.
Yeah, for years, as we talk amongst ourselves, we're using an average of like 68%. That's kind of.
Do a name and
Excuse
title.
me, say, you do your name and title.
Oh, okay.
Is that
Who you're
microphone on?
representing a district or an association.
And who do you representing?
Can't
Just
don't see right now.
Okay.
Ogden or?
Zane Woolston, Union Business Administrator, Ogden School District.
Okay, that's sufficient.
Thank you. Appreciate being here today. So as we talk, the number we've used amongst ourselves is 68%. So I wasn't at the meeting that day, but I know they were taken aback by this. All of a sudden, the state board's telling us that we're being reimbursed at 80% of costs. So that does beg the question, what costs are we talking about? And how do you parse that out? The reporting vehicle that we have is the AFR and the APR. Now the APR drills down better than the AFR. We use function 2700 for all of our transportation related expenses. But the APR will say, okay, of that 2700, we're going to look at the program. So if we're program accounting properly, our to and from expenses are using program 5315, but that column on the program report also includes 0600 and a couple others, I think. So that kind of convolutes it, and it's kind of oversimplifying things to look at the APR, especially the AFR, if we want to drill down to those costs. And depending on how the school district is handling some of those expenses, it gets even more convoluted. As an example, if I'm a smaller school district and I have one fleet mechanic, he's working on school buses and trucks and cars and lawnmowers and a lot of other things. And so to be able to say, all right, this much of his pay and benefits is associated with to and from is really hard to get at. It gets lumped in with 2,700 in a lot of cases. Those that are a little more strategic might say, well, they'll take a look and say, well, a certain percentage of that is for lawnmowers and vehicles and things, and so we'll allocate a percentage of his pay to function 2,700 and another part of his pay to function 2,600, but that's hard to keep track of, and it's a swag at best. So it's a complicated issue. Now, Ogden School District, I pay first student to do my busing. So I get a bill from them for my regular routes to and from school, some of which are eligible, some of which aren't. And I get a bill from them that includes my costs for field trips and activities and things like that. So it's kind of easy for me to get down to, here's my to and from cost. It's even more complicated when you factor in Ogden School District. My cost includes a depreciation expense that first student throws on my bill to pay for their buses. Okay, so if you look at my costs, I'm like 48% covered by the allocation, but I know mine includes a bus fleet and the depreciation expense and all of the things that based on our contract with them. It's not an easy thing, and I don't know what we're going to have to do. I think we need to have some serious dialogue of what counts, what doesn't count. Todd Hauber is the one pushing out the spreadsheet to all of us that we've been working on to try to parse into that a little bit more, what we consider direct expenses, what we consider indirect expenses, what are our capital expenditures for, because at the end of the day, it'll be interesting to see how it looks. Based on what I've seen of what's been done so far by those that have completed that survey, it is landing in the 67-68% neighborhood. So it would be nice to be able to come to some consensus on where we land with this.
Kathleen and Natalie.
This is really important because as we learned from our person who decides what we're paying all our money on, busing was one of the things we spent the liability, that's the word I was looking for. My question is, if we dedicated more money to our busing, would that alleviate the liability? Because if we're paying it here to avoid paying it here, and we should be paying it here to avoid paying it here, then we are going to be saving ourselves money. Because right now, if we're not fully funding it and we're trying to do it less expensively, we're actually costing ourselves more money because we have all these accidents. I mean, the public should know that our school buses are very safe, but that is part of the problem in our liability right now. We are spending a lot of money on that. Would that alleviate it if we funded it
I
better?
don't see that being an issue.
A connection?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. It's more of a question of how do you drill down to the expense. Now, the reason that we had suggested the $5 million a year to get us up to the 85% was whatever that difference happens to be, whether we're at 80, whether we're 65, we're eating that difference out of money that could be going into the classroom. And so we would like to get the funding from the state at least up to the statutory allowance. So the proposal was $5 million a year until we hit the 85%. So if we're there in a year, or if we're there in 3, or if we're there in 6, we want to eventually get to that point so that we can, so that we're not subsidizing transportation any more than we have to. out of money that could be going into the classroom. That's the intent.
Natalie?
One thing that I was going to add is, just like with every other formula in the minimum school program, we've been going through and looking to determine, based on what statute says and what rule says, if we think the formula is doing what we all think it's doing. We haven't gone to transportation yet, but I think this is a great opportunity to have that conversation. As we were coming through some of the data and some of the things that are used in the formula that we're doing right now, some of the costs that were excluded, we don't know why. And we're wondering why we're excluding those. Why is this category not being included in the eligible to/from costs? And I think just like with rules, we don't put rules in place and then never reevaluate them. Like, I think this is a really great opportunity for all of us to come together and make sure that we understand what our data is saying, which is the survey that the business administrators are doing and the surveys that we have here and the data that we have here. We can bring those two things together to come up with a group recommendation, which I think is our desire. Usually when we make recommendations to the appropriations committees, like when we ask for an increase in the value of the WPU, we go up and talk about all the increased costs. We don't have a formula that exactly prescribes what the cost should be or how much it should be or what an average is. This formula functions a little bit differently than some of our other funding formulas. And so from our perspective, we think it's a great opportunity to sit down and talk with everyone and make sure that we're all on the same page. We're asking for very detailed data that we've never asked anyone to gather with such preciseness before. And that's not entirely fair, I think, for our business administrators, especially this time of year, to have to pick out those pieces and report back quickly so that we can make a decision. I think that we feel strongly that there is unreimbursed costs this year that justify the $5 million. And if that's the message that goes forth and we have the opportunity to determine how that should be valued, we can do that in the interim and continue forward with those recommendations. I think the board's recommendation that was supportive and the same as our LEA partners is still the same. And so from our perspective, we welcome the opportunity to talk through some of those things and maybe make some revisions. Just like Zane indicated, there's a trade-off to having people record expenditures at such a detailed level. We don't make our business administrators, for every tank of gas that they use, split out costs between activities and field trips and to/froms. Like that would be an exponential waste of time for everybody. And so we've got to find a way to use the data that we're collecting and come up with some consistent manner that we can treat everyone equitably. And I think that's our big concern, is that we want to make sure that what we're using is the same convention for all, so that everybody can feel and report back to their local boards, this is the percentage that we're getting reimbursed right now, and that measure will be consistent across the whole state, so that Ogden's board won't get one message, Logan's board won't get another, San Juan's won't get another. We want that to be equitable so that everybody can understand what we're doing.
Yeah, I would throw out as a consideration, let's get a little task force together. Let's sit down and try to come to consensus on some of the stuff like you mentioned. We do submit a lot of data to the state. I mean, we can estimate how much of our fuel is going to field trips based on the miles and, you know, the 6 miles a gallon that we get with our buses, or 10, whatever that happens to be if we're lucky. The Schedule A's that we have to submit, every route, it's listed, and those are to and from routes, and it lines out if it's eligible or not. Whether or not it's eligible, for me, it's a cost to and from. And my thinking is the reason they funded it 80%, 85 in statute instead of 100 is because they recognize we're going to have to eat some of that, but I don't think we should have to eat maybe all of it. So, yeah, let's take a look at that. It is sort of embarrassing, I think, for everybody at the table when you get in a legislative committee meeting. The state brings something to the table and the VAs bring something to the table, and there's this big gap between what's there. It doesn't make any of us look very good, so.
I agree.
I'm sure that was an uncomfortable situation.
I'm not clear what the board can do on this, and we have limited time. So we've taken 19 minutes on this. I'm going to allow about 2-3 more minutes, and I think we really need to move on.
Okay, there was a couple of questions. It was like, so what's a $5 million for, and that? And for me, it was a no-brainer at all, because I it was going to go towards the on the eligible average expense, we're trying to get to 85. I don't know, I cannot comprehend how there could be any confusion, because the State Board of Education, this is a game we play. Now, I also recognize you play a little different game in how
Ours is just a survival game.
yeah, exactly, and how you code and how you do put everything together. And so there's just two parts of this, Joel, and time's important. Number one is, I think unless we're gonna change it, that 5 million is going towards those eligible expenses averaging. That is not being, we're not changing that. However, in light of everything, we can move forward and start that conversation and tweak, bring betterments to the process on what's eligible. And we've got to get the BAs on the same page with us on the messaging here of what we're trying to do on trying to get the funds. It's that simple to me. Chair is moving out of this. It's clearly on this one path for the 5 million. Easy to explain, very easy, because it's lacking. And so I don't think it takes a motion, except maybe a motion. Would it be a task force? What would be the recommendation from this group to start that conversation of the betterments that we can come to the eligibility part of how we put our formula together?
Should we ask staff to work with the BAs and come back to us next month and report on this?
Well,
Where should we go?
well, it's going to take quite a bit of work, and do you want a board member participating in that, or have them
I'm
come back
thinking
with?
This was not a good month to do that.
There's never a good month for any of our staff. Sorry to interrupt, and there's never a good month for any BA they don't have these pause moments. But a conversation, I don't think they can do it in a month, but I think over a period of time they could.
Natalie?
I think there are some short-term objectives that we will have to accomplish this month, and then some long-term objectives. I think from the short-term perspective, we've already committed to sit down with all of our business administrators and the representatives from UASBO and try to work out something quickly so that we can get to the end of the session and have a consistent message. So that's going to occur, task force or not, and we're willing and able and happy to update everyone on the progress of that. Long term, I think if we want to have a longer term conversation about data points, formulas, that's something that we can take a lot longer on and do later. But I do feel strongly that we need to continue forward with we've been having communications with UASBO all week, just trying to get down to getting the data that you've gathered, using the data we put together, and trying to come to a middle ground on those two things so that we can potentially go back if anyone asks and make a recommendation on the measure. And I think that that's probably, whether we're asked or not, I think it's important that we're on the same page, especially during the session. And so we'll continue to work on that. That's a core objective of us right now. So.
I don't know if it's a state board action issue necessarily, unless there's some rule required at some point that says here's what you will include and here's what you won't.
Kathleen, I think we're done.
Okay. You were talking about the middle school program and kind of which codes we pay for. So that's not consistent across every district about what kind of things we pay for with the bus? I didn't understand that part, so I need that clarified. And is that something that we're looking to clarify more, to make sure that we're paying for, like, the guy that takes care of the bus and the guy that fills the bus up?
I think that the way that we manage the formula is consistent. I'm unsure if everyone's understanding of the data elements of the formula is. And
Okay.
we don't have right now a clear rule or policy that makes a list of all those things. It kind of goes back to the conversation you were having earlier. Are we transparent enough about what we're including and what we're not? We don't think that we have been transparent enough to the LEs. Some people are new and maybe don't know. Others who've been around do. We want to make sure that we have clear instructions so that everybody knows what we're using, so everyone's understanding is the same.
And then we gotta find a reporting vehicle
Yep.
that aligns with that somehow.
Okay, thanks.
Linda?
So I'm wondering if we should ask them to come back at what's a good time to give you enough time? So you could come back and report to us, yes, we've met, we think we need a rule change, or we don't, or whatever. Is there a month that you could think we'll be ready for that we could ask you to just come back and report?
I think for the short term that we would be able to come back in a week or two and let you know the results of our conversations. In the long term, probably sometime in the summer, to get everyone through budgets and tax hearings and things, some July or August.
Yeah, easily.
Probably fine.
We have a conference in April, the VAs do, and there's an opportunity there that the state board usually comes and makes a presentation, and that's a good opportunity to have a dialogue with all of us.
Mhm.
So,
So maybe Cammy can keep track of that for us and ask them to come back in like August or something.
That's fine. Let's do that. And let's just, I think this is an important moment to kind of highlight this. This system is antiquated and is designed for contention. There will always be enormous struggles to say what is reimbursed and what is not, unless we keep locked in essentially a 1970s model of transportation, which is I think we are. I mean, in Utah compared to other states in public education, we're way behind on using public transportation, private services, Uber, even bicycling. This system, and then you look at how we treat our charter schools, and it's almost irrational. We can't justify why charter schools aren't getting anything when they frequently have a longer transportation route. And I appreciate there's rural and urban, but such a clean solution would just be increase the WPU and let people like Zane figure out how best to do it, and make the school districts, I'm gonna say this, and I'm okay if I get in trouble, man up a little and decide what routes they're gonna bus and what they're not. Instead of having this formula of 1.5 and 2 miles, which they say, well, the state mandates on us, so that's what we do. No, they can decide, and then they can even charge people for riding the bus. Charge for school lunch, you can charge for school bus. So this is going to be an ongoing challenge to take enormous amount of people's time, like Zane and Natalie, and it will be an ongoing source of contention until we move to something like that. Until we do, though, this is an absolutely efficient use of time, and Zane should advocate for it, and Natalie should crunch the numbers to try and create a fair formula, as fair as possible for those reimbursements. But this process will discourage innovation and a lot of the progress that other states are making in public transportation, for their students. Okay, that's all I had to say. Thank you, Zane.
thank you.
I wanted to stay.
Okay, that took 27 minutes. We're not going too fast. Item 1.4, hopefully it won't take nearly as long. It's only discussion.
So item 1.4 is the necessarily existent small schools formula discussion, and it's a lot of the same as what you just heard about with transportation. Again, we've been working through, out on the Board of Education side, when I was appointed to my position as school finance director, I was instructed by the board and the superintendency at the time to work our way down through the formulas and make sure that we were being transparent with all LEAs, we were using the correct data sources, the formula was doing what we thought it should be doing, and if we found gaps in those things, we should make recommendations for rule changes, task forces, statute changes, those kinds of things. We started looking at NES a couple of years ago and had some questions about how at the staff level we were implementing or complying with statute. There was a preliminary report that was issued as a result of a task force that was convened by the legislature. And that preliminary report, kind of the outcome of that is that we needed to do a lot more work and have more data. I believe at the direction of Chair Huntsman, there was a group put together that contained the regional service centers and some of the LEAs who receive NES funding. Us as board staff were also included in that group. We met about 3 times and kind of had some of the same conversations that we had before in the task force. We, from the board's perspective, felt that we had left that conversation at, we're going to do a year of data collection at the school level and come back with some recommendations. We met a little bit during the summer. We talked a little bit again about the application and implementation concerns we had, and then some of the formula concerns that we had. One of the big formula concerns that we noted as staff is that we don't distribute all the money. And I know that there was a group long before I was here that put together a carryover distribution formula that has been codified, it is in statute. Any carryover that isn't distributed through NES goes out into the tax, it's called like a tax effort formula, that goes out in the next year with the current year distribution. We've gone back over the past few years and there has been carryover in that account ever since, and we think part of the problem is because a major part of the NES formula are regression tables. And based on all the individuals we've been able to talk to in the past, those regression tables were based on school level cost many years ago. But those regression tables can't be adjusted according to statute without authorization. And at the board level, we don't have the data necessary to adjust those original tables. We can't even replicate them. We've taken them to statisticians. We've talked to people that are a whole lot smarter than we are, and they can't replicate the data either. One primary concern of ours is we didn't want to rush something to make a recommendation for this legislative session that would harm our LEAs. We didn't want to put a recommendation forth that all of our LEAs didn't have the opportunity to study, to have feedback on, and again, it's exactly like the conversation with transportation. Everyone was asked, or our LEAs were asked, to put a data collection together, and as we looked at them in totality at the state level, we found that individuals and LEAs, because we hadn't given a clear definition of what was necessary, were making different decisions. Nobody was doing anything inappropriate or trying to manipulate anything. It's just we didn't give clear instructions on that data collection. And so we feel this year, as we're doing school level reporting and we're collecting that information through UPEFs, that data will come in the 1st of October. We do allow LEAs to make adjustments clear up until they submit their financial statements in November. We'd like to pull that data, get the task force back together, analyze it, and come up with a recommendation as a group. As we've been working through this process, which is taking longer than some of our other processes have, again, a recommendation came forth to add more money to this formula. It happened in exactly the same order that's happening right now. We had the transportation discussion, we had the NEST discussion. A few hours or days earlier, we'd had to report to the fiscal analyst's office all the places that we have carryover, places we didn't distribute money last year, and NEST happened to be one of those formulas. And so the committee asked us to explain why we were asking for more money in this formula if we weren't distributing what we had. And some of that is just a function of the way the formula is working. We want to work together to come up with a way that we don't harm the LEAs that rely on this. There absolutely, just like with transportation, is a need for additional funds to be directed to schools in rural areas. They have a difficult time retaining and recruiting teachers to teach subject matter. Cost to get students to school, cost to maintain schools in these rural areas is not always as economical as some of those that are closer together. And we want to have the data to back that up so that everyone can review and evaluate these formulas and know that the money is going where it needs to go. That, again, was brought up in Public Education Appropriations Committee. We feel like we're kind of in a holding pattern until we have data collection. During the summer, we can absolutely have conversations with the groups about the eligibility criteria. That's not dependent upon the financial data. And then we can book that with the financial piece and have a recommendation, we think, probably by December of next year, which should be in time for the legislative session.
Mark and then Linda.
On the carryover, what percent of the total budget ended up being carried over?
I know the dollar amount. I don't know the percent because Jamie's not here. The dollar amount's been ranging between $700,000 and $500,000, which again, that amount gets distributed through the tax effort formula in the next year.
Yeah.
And we've gone back, I think, clear to fiscal year 13, and there was a fairly consistent amount that's been carried over since then, kind of in that same fashion.
Follow that.
Yeah.
So the task force was going to try to improve that formula, but at the same time, if we tweak it a certain way, there's winners, losers, and also I view this, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there's the potential of overspending. Is that true?
I think that just like the transportation conversation, LEAs are supplementing or incurring additional costs above what the NEST formula provides them using their local resources. Is that fair?
Yeah, the whole point of it is just basically to recognize that there are economies of scale in operating schools, and if I've got a school out in Grouse Creek that's a one-room schoolhouse, which is the classic example, it's going to cost me more per student to operate that school than Box Elder High School, for instance. And so, yeah, it's a very complex formula. As we talk here, I'm just wondering why, at what point in time do you know there's going to be a carryover, and why couldn't that just be sent out to the schools receiving NEST funding on a percentage of the total that they're getting
It's in statute.
to eat it up? So,
So my concern with this is, yes, there's going to be winners and losers. We've known this for a couple of years. There's not really a formula. We just have the regression tables. nests, right? And so we're trying to put together a formula that's gonna work. I've had superintendents talk to me and say, you know, I think I could get some nest funding for this school. There's a school just like it over here that gets a lot of nest funding and we're getting nothing. But I don't dare say anything because everybody jumps on me, right? Because they're afraid they're gonna lose their funding. And so, to me, we need to get a good formula together. And yes, there's probably gonna be winners and losers, but I think as the board, we need to say, this is the formula, this is the way it's gonna be, and take the fallout if there's fallout. And I'm agreeing with Natalie. I think that probably everybody will end up getting more money if we can just agree to the fact that we need to come up with a formula. And that's how I feel about it. We need to get this formula in place.
Natalie, just tell me in 15 seconds, what is the justification for even having nests? Why do we have this at all?
Our school districts are required to provide educational services to students in the locations or the places where they live. And so some LEAs have schools in smaller or rural areas because that's the best, safest way to keep them in their communities. Our LEAs also have the option, so we have some schools who are right on the borders who send students to other states and they exchange tuition. It's all based on what the best environment for the student is and the safest environment for the student.
So, Joel, could I add, I think we forget when we say NESS, exactly what that acronym stands for. Necessarily existent small schools, so you don't really have a choice. That's the way it is. So unlike Ogden School District, I've got schools with close to 300 kids, but they're not necessarily existent. We're choosing to operate those schools at that level. But if you go out to Grouse Creek or wherever you're at,
Big water.
you have what you have, and it costs a lot more
Yeah.
per student to educate those kids for reasons that Natalie stated. And the necessarily existent small schools formula was set up because we recognize that, and it's an intentional effort in state formula to try to bridge that gap a little bit.
It's impossible. I mean, it will always be contentious, and there's no way to measure it. But I completely agree with what Board Member Hanson said. Let's just get a formula and apply it, and everyone gets it, because it shouldn't be a game. It should just be a formula, and everyone gets it if we're going to do it.
Well, I'd like to think that people aren't gaming it.
I'm with you.
Are
they gaming it
I've
now?
heard
We should
stories about
ask.
that, but
Natalie wanted to.
you know,
Linda
if
seemed
they're
to think they're
necessarily existent, they shouldn't be gaming them.
Linda, from what Linda said, I can't imagine how they can't game it. I mean, the BAs are supposed to maximize the revenue they get. Absolutely, they're gaming it. In fact, I'd say the BA's not doing his job if he's not gaming it, he or she. Linda?
So maybe Natalie can tell us when she thinks that it's reasonable to bring us the formula. You know, and I think we can ask her to bring a formula to us and say, these guys can get together and they can work out however they want to work it out, but we should have a date and say, by this date, Natalie needs to bring us the formula, and so all the work needs to be done.
Second.
So I
No,
think the earliest possible time that we could do that would be the December board meeting of this year. We want to get our data collection in and have sufficient time for our staff as well as the business administrators to meet together and discuss it. I think that we should probably be able to work out the formula, recommendations, or clarifications in time to have it before the next legislative session if we need statutory changes or if we want to change the carryover provision. Right now, the carryover provision doesn't allow us to distribute until the next year. It's in statute. And if we want to change that, that's an easy fix, I think. So, but the mere fact that we have a carryover distribution formula tells me that we've had this problem for a while. So,
Yeah, it's a surprise that it hasn't been distributed.
Could we try to set that for November so that if we're trying to take action, we can, I think December, seems like whenever we set a December deadline, we don't ever meet it. So,
well, your data isn't going to come in until the 1st of October, and LEAs have the opportunity to make adjustments as they
Through
finish
the
their
month.
financial statements.
through the month of November?
Yes,
Through the month of
so the
October. Through the
earliest
month
we'd
of
be able to
October.
pull it is probably the 1st of
Okay.
November, hoping no one makes any changes, which would only give the group 30 days to work through all that information and make recommendations. So it might take us a 4-hour meeting, it might take us 3 weeks of 4-hour meetings,
So-
I don't know.
So we have last year's data, so we can at least
No.
get,
So we don't have school level data from every LEA until this year.
Till this year.
And that's the piece that we're waiting for. You're right, I do have last year's data, but it doesn't have school level expenditures.
Alright.
This is the first year we're collecting school level expenditures.
My concern, sorry, Joel, can I?
Linda.
So my concern is that we have an election coming up, right? And in January, we turn everybody over, so we would see this in December. And then it would go to the board in January, which would be a new board and a new, I guess it wouldn't matter because it'd be out of committee, so it would be a new board. So hopefully, we can get everybody up to speed so that
Just because
they'll
no one's been
understand.
reelected in 4 years, doesn't mean it could happen.
It could happen.
Theoretically.
Theoretically. You and I might still be here, and Mark too. So,
And you too.
I defer
December's
to you.
good.
When's good?
December's good.
Okay,
he's gonna have faith, so December's good.
okay.
Do we need a motion? To have
I think so.
Natalie bring this
I think
back?
that's staff,
Natalie
Natalie
knows.
understands that. We'll go from there.
Cammy will make a note.
Okay, Zane, thank you. Moving on, we're gonna go to item 1.5, LEA, non-compliance. I think I saw Joel Coleman, would you please come up? Natalie, why don't you, after this one, we're gonna take a short break.
So we need like a good news minute or something. So, quite quickly, this agenda item we routinely place is on the agenda to provide the committee an update as to LEAs who may or may not have met their statutory requirements. Statutory requirements pertaining to submitting their financial reports, submitting their financial data, and submitting all of their data elements. We have one LEA that we're still working with, as you can imagine, it's a school for the deaf and the dumb, to get their October 1st and December 1st student data collections updated. They did make submissions in October and December, but as we reviewed them, it appears that they may not be accurate and not capturing all students. Right now, we have done allocations based on that preliminary data collection. Just for members of the committee, we don't allocate USDB WPUs like other LEAs receive. And so we proceeded forward with the data collection knowing that some of their stuff was missing because it would have held up the rest of the state. But they also don't participate in all those formulas. They have other state funding that funds their school activities. So specifically pertaining to the funding that they receive, their special education allocation that comes under federal IDEA right now is not accurate because we don't have accurate data, and the school institutional trust lens allocation that they receive is also not accurate. Those funds haven't been distributed, they haven't gone out to anybody, and so we still have the opportunity to update those things, but from a statutory perspective, they didn't make the deadlines. The one last thing that I will add is that we do have a procedure and a process for our LEAs to submit change data tables all the time. To my knowledge, I don't remember having to replace an entire collection, an entire data collection before. It can be done. We're working that through with our IT and data and statistics staff, and I know that they've been working very closely with the USDB to resolve some technical issues and a few things that are going on with the data collection. We're hoping to have that done quite soon, but for the committee's information only, replacing an entire data collection in a data set that we've already validated and started using poses some technical challenges, and that takes a lot of time and energy from our IT and our data and statistics staff, not only to validate, but it's likely we may have to hand enter every student into the collection, and hopefully we found a fix for that, but it does take some time and effort from your staff, and so that's really the report that we have. We don't have any concerns that we'll get the data collection from USDB. Obviously, we're all working together and trying to resolve the issue, but we're required to report to you as the board, as you have a statutory monitoring responsibility to let you know the status of where we are.
Okay, so these are the school LEA that we're mad at this week, and you told us a little bit. I think it's.
We had one more
You're in the
originally on the
principal's
agenda,
office.
and they submitted their required report last week, so,
Who was that, just for the record?
AISU.
Okay, good. And did they under-report or over-report?
I believe it's under.
Under. Okay, well, that's a different concept. If they're over-reporting, I'm really concerned. Under-reporting, it's like, what the heck? So let's let them explain what the heck.
Right, thank you. So, a little embarrassing to be here, but we're glad that.
You're in the principal's
We're happy to do it, yeah. I give a lot of lip service to.
But you're not
never
alone.
shying away from accountability, and so here I am, being very accountable. So, it appears as we've dug into this the last little while, there's a confluence of a few different factors that have happened. One was that we went to a brand-new SIS system this year, and the second is probably more personnel-related, which in a public meeting, I won't get into very many details there, but to reassure you that we're actually taking care of those issues right now. And we'd be happy to share details with you, maybe if you want to get into that granular detail, maybe in a closed meeting or individually. But we've found the problem. Our December report actually was more accurate than we thought it was at first. We think it was where it should be. The October count was not. And so part of it is technical, where we have the fatal errors and we're looking at ways to fix them, like Natalie said, and whatever it takes, if it's hand entering or whatever, we'll get it right. We think we're on track so that the next big critical event like this is in June, and we will definitely have everything accurate and up to speed, including our personnel on the inside, our systems, and knowing exactly what we're doing with the USBE data. So that's kind of a superintendent overview. I'm going to let Superintendent Tanner tell you a little bit more, because the folks responsible for this report directly to her and Superintendent Lassiter, since it's registrar type duties for the schools. And so what they've done as superintendents is actually gotten right into the weeds, gotten their hands into the dirt, and dug through every single little thing so that we can remedy this and make sure that it never happens as we go forward. So Superintendent, I'll let you just add what you want to.
You really covered most of it. Our October 1 data was underreported because of our SIS and some problems we were having with reporting. Our December 1, we're noticing that we still need to accurately represent our special ed students. So that's the small piece of the data that we're working on that. And we're working with the USBE staff to get our data in there correctly, and it's not commonly done, so it's taking a little extra legwork to figure out how we do that. So we're working with them.
Approximately how many the records are?
Oh, well, our October 1 was 111. We had 111 students. We actually should have had 290 students in there. So that's half the funding we would need. So when we got our school land trust report, it was half what we usually get. And we haven't looked at yet our special ed funding, but I'm anticipating if we keep rolling with that, we'd sit about half. So it's important to us that we get that funding. So we're working on it. It was systems error with SIS and some other issues that we were having, as you recall.
Natalie?
I think the one thing that I would add is just how well the system and the alerts are working. We were all notified and aware of this long before it
Right.
became a non-compliance issue. Our data and statistics staff do preliminary monitoring. They picked up on this. Our IT staff was notifying both on the USDB and USBE side that the USDB was having issues with their new software. I mean, we've all known about this for a while and we're working towards getting a resolution, but the allocations as they went out, our staff were throwing up flags going, this looks really bad, what's going on? And so I think that this is it's a good thing and an opportunity for us to sort of showcase the ability that working together as an operational staff, we were able to flag each other right away and work through the problem. We do the same thing with USDB that we do with all of our LEAs. Our data and statistics staff spends exhaustive hours during the October and December collections looking to see that they're right. Sometimes our LEAs forget to put in kindergarten, or sometimes our charter schools with multiple campuses forget to do both. Like, our data and statistics staff are picking up on those anomalies right away and notifying the individuals who manage the data so that they have the opportunity to self-correct during our monitoring periods. And so, again, the fact that we only have one that we're still working with is great. Everyone else got their data in on time. 4 or 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. And so we've made a great transition over time, working cooperatively together with our LEAs and our sections to get here. And so, transitioning systems is never easy. We're living through that right now in our own world. So it happens, and we'll all work through it together. But
And we're putting some safety measures in place so that we can make sure that's accurate at each of those dates.
Natalie, I think you're saying that something happened, are in the process of fixing it reasonably, so it seems like punitive measures at this point make no sense because they have already realized their error and are moving rapidly towards fixing it.
I concur, and the staff at USDB notified us right away when they found a problem as well. And so it's not like they weren't aware that they had issues. We knew right away that they were having issues implementing their system, wasn't communicating with ours, that happens occasionally with some of our LEAs. So they know and they are aware. It's just the Board of Education is required to ensure all LEAs meet their statutory deadlines. And in the case of this, we aren't quite there yet, and so we're working through that.
Excellent. Mark?
So imagine there'll be a reconciliation that's going to take place here, and nobody's going to get damaged here, correct? Or
Right.
potential damage.
Had USDB been an LEA who was funded on all the other funding formulas, this would have been escalated to SEAL Team 5 like 2 months ago. With USDB, the impact is relatively isolated, and because we haven't allocated those funds yet, we have the opportunity to correct. Had this been a charter school or a school district, this would have been catastrophic, in my opinion, because we can't do anything with everyone until we have everybody.
One other follow-up.
Mark?
Is there, because of this, the takeaway, there's some betterments that you're going to bring into your process. Is there any lessons learned that LEAs can learn from some of these challenges on the QA/QC or whatever it is on your side to?
Can I comment on that? One of the other, I don't want to be coy about this, but I don't want to say anything that's inappropriate publicly either. So, because we are USDB, we also have some constraints with the way we address personnel issues that other LEAs and agencies don't actually have. And so although we knew about some of these things early, there have been other factors that have mitigated the time frame in which we had to respond and remedy some of these things. And so there's a couple of timelines, not just the technical part and the SIS, but also some of the internal workings with DHRM rules that we're subject to and so forth. And so the first answer to your question is yes, there actually are some lessons learned. And a little bit of that is some personnel and management decisions that we make in the future and how we structure certain positions. The others that are technical and so forth, yeah, that's certainly never going to happen again because we're completely aware of what happens in the situation now. So
I was more focusing on things that are outside of personnel. Is there some processes?
yeah.
And that others could benefit from?
Natalie?
I think that our IT and technical staff work very closely with the data folks at our LEAs, and usually within about a day or two of our first collections, they know pretty well what the issues with vendors are. One of our vendors apparently always decides to do an update right about the time we're collecting July 1st data, and so we're unsure if we could do something about that because it ruins all of our lives, but they do their major bug upgrades and product updates right the same week we're doing data collections, and I think like every year we've had some kind of major, so if we could control others, of course that would be great, but I think for the most part we've had a lot of conversations internally about data monitoring, and if we could get LEAs to do their submissions more frequently, we would be able to work out some of these bugs. There's actually a requirement in statute that they do submit weekly, and we're not seeing, or not in statute, pardon me, in rule. And so we're trying to work towards that. Again, we just don't have sufficient data staff and our IT staff to call everybody and try to find out what they're doing and why they're not doing what they're supposed to. So we're trying to mitigate, though, and move away from finding stuff out after the fact and figuring it out before, so that we don't have these major snafus. We had a really good data collection this year, again, on October 1. I don't know how much I can emphasize that. The past couple of years, as we've calculated budgets, they have been late as we've submit them up to the governor's office and the LFA because we haven't had LEAs submitting their data on time. That last year and this year, every school district and charter school LEA got their data in on time, which is hugely commendable, and we were very grateful to them for all of their efforts. It's been an astronomical thing on their side to get that data collection in, and I think sometimes with USDB, we just kind of assume that everything's okay since we don't use their data always in the same way, and they might have fallen through the cracks a little bit this year on getting it fixed quickly. We knew it was happening, but getting it fixed quickly is something that we could learn and remember to include them in all the same emails, and I think they're not on the distribution list that we send out announcements for.
This is good, but we got lots of other things and we need a break. So it's 10:30. At 10:40, I'm gonna start it again, whether you're here or not. Thank you. I mean, I guess I'm of the feeling that these 4 people have very limited time and very limited bandwidth. And I would like to see them designate probably some other people so they could work more on the stuff that we have for them. You know, Intergenerational Poverty Commission. I am sure that is a good thing. But, you know, at what expense when our superintendent doesn't have time?
It's a
And-
big deal. It's run by the lieutenant governor, and it's got a lot of people on it that are working on it, so.
Can,
I mean, Mark?
the one thing before, is I look at this data, and if I was gonna try to weigh whether they should be on here or not, or how much time, is it would be nice to have another column that shows on here frequency of meetings and an estimated annual hours on that. Before I would want to ever comment on whether I think they should be there or not. And then the other question is if I was to question something here, the person that would be talking about, I'd probably want to have present to say, hey, tell me how that's working, why you on that, and it's just to help steer the ship, but I would want that data.
No, we're no Kathleen and then Linda.
I would also like to know if the person that's attending it finds it to be a productive meeting and very valuable. I mean, I go to lots of meetings and sometimes they're just sitting there listening, and then other times you're like networking, listening to other things. I mean, I'm not picking on this one or you or anything else, but the Intergenerational Poverty Commission, I'm sure, has very far-reaching discussions that impact many, many different avenues that we probably don't even anticipate with just seeing the title of it. So the person that's going, I would like to know what they think, and exactly what Chair Huntsman said, the commitment that it requires and the payoff of it.
I agree, though, there are some things on here, like the Trust Lands Advisory Committee, I see Scott and Angie are both going to that committee. It would be kind of nice to know why they're both attending. So, anyway, but I agree, I think we need to have them come and talk to us about some of these, and if we have concerns about it.
Like the Utah Charter School Finance Authority, I think it makes sense to have the State Charter School Board find someone to serve on that instead of Deputy Jones. He doesn't have a specialized knowledge, and I think it takes substantial time from him.
The other part about choices that our superintendents here are making to be on these, they might, and it'd be good to hear from them, why they think it's relevant. Are they wanting to be better informed so that we can be better informed? Is there a certain protection piece of that says, hey, I need to be there to make sure certain things are happening a certain way and it doesn't take the wrong course? But you have a question.
No.
I wondered if it would be helpful to add to this listing, if there's a statutory appointment or something to help guide the conversation.
That would be good to know.
What if we asked them to add the number of meetings they went to in 2017, how much time, they don't spend a lot of time, but make a rough estimate, and maybe the statute or statutory thing, and then in our April board meeting, maybe we, when is our April board meeting.
Committee
I'll bet
meeting.
it's in April.
I bet it is. But is it?
The 12th and 13th.
12th and 13th. Oh, good, I'll be back. Yeah, okay, so why don't we put it in April, and we add those things to it, and then we can ask each of these four highly talented individuals that we asked to do so much to come and give us some input. And I think and probably even Linda, Mark, and Kathleen, tell me if I'm overstepping here, but tell us, identify 2 or 3 things, especially Superintendent and Deputy Jones, that they think they could push to lower level staff or to other folks. Because we need them highly focused on board activities. I'll even go farther. I am worried about burnout as well, and their relationships with their families and other things. I don't think it's bad for people to work 8-9 hour days and then go home and cook a meal and sit on the porch, walk their dog around the street. I actually think they work better in the long run if they do those sort of things, and on Saturday and Sunday don't take calls from us. Maybe don't even read Salt Lake Tribune. Just enjoy the birds. You know, I think we harm these people in the long run, and we need to have more continuity. So I'm okay with them simply not. And I think even Deputy Jones and Superintendent Dixon, I think it'd be great if they even had 2 or 3 hours a day, or even at least a week, where they had nothing to do and they got to sit down and think about what their priorities were and how they could do things. That's really how they should be. I almost think the superintendent should be doing almost anything but sitting down and thinking at times. And I'm really, when I see this long of things, and this is almost a full-time job, I think just attending all of these things. Mark?
You know, I'll just say it. I think I disagree with you a little bit. I think the superintendency that we have here, they make informed choices every day. They choose what battles they're going to fight. They choose what they're going to take on. And I don't think we are in any place to tell them what they can and can't do. Let's just, if there's an expectation that they think that we're requiring them to go something, then let's invite that. But I think we need to give full rein to our superintendency to do what they feel is best with their time, and a good portion of them will always choose to push those long days and to push to move the betterments forward. I don't think we will ever be able to pull back the reins to say, hey, I don't want you burning out. They make those choices, and this is my observation. They make them. We try to say, hey, at least on Sundays, turn it all off. And sometimes the temptation is, hey, we've got to do something to prepare for Monday, but I don't think we're going to reel them in on base or minimize that burnout thing by having a discussion on what external committees that they're on, unless they feel like we want them there. So I think the good thing that will come from this is to hear what they have to say on managing our expectations, because we set expectations for them. The other part of this, Chair, is on the voting rights that was not really of a concern, or was questioned at the time, is how binding are those? How binding is it to the board? And I think that's more of the critical conversation than whether they're going to be on it and what they do with their time. And so I think as we invite them back to talk about these things, let's talk a little bit about what kind of agenda they might be moving forward. And is it because of their professionalism, they're trying to move something, or are they trying to move? When they make those decisions, are they making them based on our strategic plan or action from us? And so I think we should have as much or more discussion on the voting side of it than.
I think on the voting, especially if they're making policy or imposing costs on our LEAs, that's where I guess I get hesitant, and I think maybe they should say, either I can't vote, or, I need to get direction from the state school board, because while we can't delegate power to board member Wright to go off and vote on things. And I don't know to what extent we can on our staff as well. Linda?
I was just gonna say, I think they're aware of that. They try to at least have you talk to Angie about that. I think that she's well aware and tries to work around those things as well. I think, I know the governor just put Sid on his suicide task force as well, so that's probably another one that needs to be added here. But, when the governor calls, it's kind of one of those things that.
Well, asked. And
Yeah, so, those things are important for us to be represented as well, so.
But, all due respect to the governor, I'm on the state school board, and if I ask the superintendent to do things, in my 3 years, it's a long, slow response. Kathleen?
I don't think that they go to each one of these as diligently as maybe, I think they take turns, so even though there's 2 people on it, maybe 2 people don't show up every time. I know there's a committee here that somebody's on that they sometimes don't go because a board member's there. So I think this is an indication of where you might have representation, but it's not always a given that they will give up something more important to be at some of these. Because some of them are more weighty and some of your agendas are more weighty. And I think that this is, not a suggestion, but I think that they do use their resources to divide and conquer. So when we say Superintendent Stallings and Deputy Superintendent Jones are both going to TAC, they might take turns.
Okay.
So that would alleviate the burden a little bit.
What kind of heart attack would it cause if we just said, you can't vote anymore? You have to bring it to the state school board. You can attend, you can participate, you can learn. You can't vote without our authority or our designation. Why are they voting on these things? Are they trying to dilute the power of the state school board? I'm concerned, what is the weightiness of this voting? Mark?
Well, let's bring them in and let them respond separately, but none of it's binding.
Some of it is.
Well, it's most of this is moving an agenda forward to something. Show me one that's binding, that takes fund, that authorizes funding or sets statute or creates a statute or board policy that's binding in education. I'm going through this, they're just moving a narrative, almost like a mission or a strategy forward, but I think they should explain themselves and not have me explain. I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes, and I'm not seeing anything binding, and I do know there's been times where people said, yeah, I'm uncomfortable taking a position like that or where this direction's going because it goes against our strategic plan, and they're not. So, but they should, let's just have, in an open meeting, let's have them talk for themselves in a very transparent way. I don't want to defend them in any way, but I don't want to take any, I'm not in a position, I don't think it would be best until you have the conversation with them for us to take a position to say, oh, you can serve, but you can never vote on a committee yet.
Okay.
Let's have some conversation.
And I think it's enlightening. When I was on the state school board previous chair kind of asked me to serve the Utah School Board Association. And before me, it had been Kim Birmingham for, I think, 10 years or more. And he had always gone and voted on behalf of the state school board at the USBA meetings. And so the USBA could then go and say the state school board is on board because this is how Kim Birmingham voted. So that ended with me. And what I'm concerned is that they're starting to say that, well, the state school board has approved this. You've gotten the input of public education because these people have voted on that. And yet we don't know what the extent they're voting, and there's no accountability. And so that's my concern. Kathleen?
I have nothing to say, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, well, I think that's enough. Well, we plan on April. coming back, and I think Natalie, it was how many meetings they went to in 2017, how much time it takes, and statutory designation. Am I missing anything? Good. On to 1.7. And I am, Natalie, why don't you, start at this.
I believe this agenda item is one that was requested by the chair of the committee to involve various stakeholders in putting agenda items on the finance committee. So I think I was prepared for you to discuss it.
Yes. I want to start the conversation this way. All the lobbyists are up at the Capitol. I think I've been approached a couple times by my friends at the UEA and a few times by Royce Van Tassel. I don't know if I've ever been approached or lobbied hardly by anyone else. May I reach out to them sometimes when I go to like the UASBO conference or other things. But you know, actually Mary Nielsen of USBA came by and had opinions, but we don't hear very much. And I want these groups to feel like all of them, they have a seat at the table, not just the Charter School Association, UEA. But I want them almost to be thinking that on a monthly basis, I'd like to take maybe half an hour, and each of them, you know, I'll time them. They won't get much time, but ask them to come, and they don't have to come, but they can come once a month. We'll see how many of them come. We'll divide up the time, and we'll give them a few minutes to say, basically the mandate, because it's the Finance Committee, how can we be more effective? Tell us something that we can make a change where the benefits would exceed the costs. And give us a handout, say, here are the benefits, here's the cost, here's what you think we can do. I want them thinking, because our staff is overwhelmed, and they're thinking, you know, how to do things. I want to hear from these groups, what we can do. And after each one, the Finance Committee will either say, thank you very much, or tell staff maybe do these things, maybe, you know, a rule, a law, just some different guidance, and or, you know, maybe we'll take it to the full board. I want that kind of churn, that input. I want them, you know, really hitting stuff into my head on a monthly. I want to hear from these groups and how we can get better. So those are some of the groups you see: UEA, USBA, UASBO, Special Education, Charter School Association, Charter School Network. So I guess what I'm first asking the Finance Committee, is this worth taking a half an hour, you know, monthly for Finance Committee meetings? And if you think it's too crazy, maybe we'll just do it for 3 months and then maybe reevaluate it. So anyway, I'm putting that out there. What do you think? Kathleen?
I think that's a great idea. I think that we should have a time limit for it. Currently, I think that all of us are contacted individually, and the message might be not the same to all of us, so it would be nice to hear a consistent message and a consistent concern. I think there should be some scope to what they can discuss with us, if they would like to look at the agenda and discuss something that's on the agenda for that day. We can request that they can make public comment for a minute, 2 minutes for dialogue, limit it to 15, 20 minutes to a half an hour, depending on the conversations that we, I mean, like I said, I think it'd be nice to have a consistent message being said to all of us and some reflection about the practices we have right now. And just to build trust and cohesiveness and partnerships with the entities that were listed.
Okay. Linda, I see your hand.
I'm just wondering, would we have them sign up in advance, or just sign a piece of paper, or just line up and come to the table, or how would we manage that to make sure that we had enough time?
I think we'd email out, I'd email out the invitation and CC all of you, you know, to each of these groups. Would ask them to 2 weeks beforehand, and we'll promise them at least 5 minutes, you know, nothing more. But they could send a representative. They certainly, you know, bring more than one. And, you know, to anything that they think a change we could make where the benefits would exceed the costs, as measured by them. I don't want to, you know, as measured by them. And we want their kind of, you know, germination or fertilization of our brain power and what we're thinking about and what we're doing. And and,
I think stakeholder input is always a great idea.
yeah. So, Mark, do you have anything to add?
Well, her hand was
Oh,
up
excuse
before
me,
mine.
Adam?
Just from the staff perspective, it sounds like the chair will be making invitations. I know the rule that we follow when we're putting something on the agenda is to clearly distinguish whether it's a discussion item or an action item. And
Okay.
anything that's actionable has to be noticed and comply with grandma, I believe. And so my question would be is discussion and
Yeah.
having conversation is different than the board taking an action. And it sounded like in the conversation that there may be some anticipation that we would take action that day. And so I think if that were the case, that we would have to get whatever documentation or
that's
item
formal.
in
Yeah.
advance, and that might be coordinating. So
Mm.
I wondered if the direction moving forward, if we do this, would be that we would have a discussion month and then an action month after that, or if the intent is to do both in the same meeting.
I think just have a discussion, and then the board would decide whether to make it an action, or what further guidance to take it. If we make an action item the next month, or give staff to work on it. Kathleen?
So looking down the road, I'm foreseeing some potential hurdles. We have these organizations that are, substantial. What would it take for an organization to call themselves an association and then demand to have the same amount of time? Or is there gonna be a criteria that, does that make sense? So if 7 of us get together and we decide that we're the organization that hates your gavel, do we give them time too? I mean, what would be the defining mark? And so would it be an invitation to people that, would they solicit us? I mean, so I think that we would want to keep it to a specific set that we could revert back to and say, these are the people that represent over 1,000 people, or have a 504, I don't know, so, and not a 504, a 503, or an IEP, just kidding.
I'm sorry, do you have something, you want to come
Yeah,
up?
well, I was
Come
just-
up, state your name
And
and who you are.
I didn't want to interrupt, I was going to wait
Your name
until
and who you are.
after the meeting. My name is Terry Rhodes. I am here, I'm on the Cache County School Board here representing USBA.
Okay.
And since you're talking about
Yeah.
them as a part of this particular group, I thought I would just tell you, I can't speak for the rest of the groups. For USBA, I can tell you that in every month's meeting, USBA assigns 1 or 2 representatives to be at every standing committee meeting of the state board. So, which is why I'm here every month.
Okay.
And my partner had to leave because she was headed to the Joint Legislative Committee on Capitol Hill. So, but just speaking for USBA, you do have representatives in every standing committee from USBA every month.
Because Chair Huntsman and I just had a great conversation at the break, where it just seems it's kind of a game where everyone works within it to maximize their interests within the game. And what I want from you guys is really to come and say, how can we change the rules of the game so it's better, for everyone? And that's what I think we aren't thinking about too much. And that will even require, I think, different thinking on your part. Mark?
Appreciate you being here. We see you often, and it's good to see your organization to a lot of our meetings and that. But I want to come back to this. Where we're going with this, Joel. Chair Wright. My biggest concern with this being rolled out the way that you want to roll out, this is going to turn into a half hour of town hall. And we are not a town, this is not a town hall, this committee meeting. This committee meeting takes care of, this is finance committee, financial and other assignments that are put on it. And we do invite stakeholder input, and we actually have a procedure to get stakeholder input. And that is, we, as individual board members, are constantly working within different groups and different people, and we have the power as board members, especially if we get another board member behind us to advocate to have something put on an agenda. It can be put on a committee agenda, it can be put on our board meeting agenda, and time and that assigned to whatever it is, and it could be just straight information. It could be information with an action attached to it, but that process already exists, and what we're talking about here is just a public comment period that we're trying to invite to them, and you're wanting to designate a half hour to that. And the hardest part of that is going to be, do I recognize individuals or organizations? And I think that's going to backfire on us if that isn't well managed. We can still get to where you want to be if you assign to Finance Committee members to say, reach out and invite, and in this block of time, we want to hear what betterments can come through this committee that can come to the board. And we put the people down on here, so we reach out and actively say, hey, they have a great idea. And I think we can do that and bring those betterments forward, especially on things that we can introduce to the Eliminating Barriers Task Force. Not everything, and I just want to go back to another comment where not everything that could come from the stakeholder group doesn't have to have, you referred to it, the benefits exceed the cost. Mm-hmm. It might be expensive and something that, I don't think we want to put our people that are bringing something to it to go as far as to report on the benefits, how the benefits will exceed the cost. We have staff that are going to vet all of that. So I'm taking too much of your time, but I think my suggestion would be, let's block out some time, and then we as Finance Committee people say, hey, I've got 2 ideas or 3 or something I want to bring these people in, and try that, then just put it out to an open invitation. And if we could try that a little bit, I think we might move the betterments quicker than having the challenges of turning something into a town hall meeting. That's my 2 cents.
Linda?
I'm going to disagree with Mark a little bit. I think there's some value in just letting people stand up and give their opinion. But just so you know, what I did in law and licensing that I thought was very helpful, at the beginning of the meeting, I would ask anybody who was here representing organizations to stand up and introduce themselves. So then we knew in the audience who was there. And that was helpful and then we also asked them to give public comment. You know, after every agenda item we had, we'd ask for public comment, and then we would let them come up for, it depended on how, that was run by me. Sometimes they'd get a minute, sometimes they'd get 2 minutes, depending on what the clock looked like, and then we just let them comment on those agenda items. But I think you could also run it where, like we do at board meeting, where you have an open time anytime during the meeting and say, you can sign up and come in and talk to us about anything you want to. So I think it's just kind of however you want to do it.
After 3 years, we've just been so, staff internally, driven, and I think we've made tremendous progress in organizing and improving our staff. And I hope we're somewhat there, and so I really want this kind of pollination and germination of ideas. How about this? We'll, somewhere kind of in between. How about we'll take only half an hour every month. I will I will invite 2 of these groups. I'll take input from all of you, and I'll ask them, if they can't do 1 month, then it's next month. But I'll start going to these groups, and we'll say, hey, we're inviting you to the May 2018 meeting. You'll have 15 minutes, and we want to hear from you on an issue where you think the benefits exceed the costs. a change the state school board could make that would be good. Keep it to one issue. You can't go to two. You have to choose your best shot. And you might get another chance to do this. We're trying this for now, and we'll see how it goes. And say we'll do that for 3 or 4 months, and we'll come back and we might change that. Linda?
So can I ask you a question as far as who can come and who can't come? If they want to come, can they contact any of us and then
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can?
Yeah, so I'm going to be inviting these like 6, 7 groups. And if there's anyone who wants to be added, contact a member of the finance committee or myself,
Okay,
and we'll do that.
that's great.
And but also, I mean, we all appreciate, we've been around long enough, when a USBA representative comes and says something, it simply carries more weight than, no offense, I'm Terry Jones, I'm a Cache County school board member. That's great, that still carries some weight, but if you're saying, I'm here in my USBA capacity and USBA feels X, Y, and Z, that's going to carry more weight with me. Kathleen?
Terry's here with us today, and usually you'll see Jay Blaine out there, and so I think all of our organizations are being represented. Usually we have Royce Van Tassel, and I don't know all the other people, but I see familiar faces every time I'm here.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think a lot of them are already here consistently, or somewhere in the building. I have to concur with Mark's cautionary advice about it's going to take up some time. I liked Linda's suggestion about recognizing the people in the room. I think that would be a nice way to bring them in, but to reach out to people on random months, I think that's going to cause some stress.
Terry?
Can I just respond to that? As organizations, we appreciate how open the committees, the standing committees and the board are to listen to us already. And that's why we send representatives every month, because we know that I can sit back there and listen to the whole meeting, and then if I have a concern or something that I might add to your conversation, I can raise my hand and you might recognize me and let me come and speak. But if you assigned me a month to speak, I might not have anything to say.
That's fine.
So, but we appreciate that, that you as board members are open to us, and I think that's why we're here. Because we know that we can be allowed to be part of your meetings.
This is good. You're being blown with the wind or swimming with the current. I want you to hop out of the river, have a new vision, say this is something you guys could do that would be better. I want you to start infiltrating and pollinating us that way, and not just trying to work within the system to maximize gains. I want serious ideas for change and how we can do better, because that's what I see. Everybody just kind of maximizes their play within that. And we're actually the ultimate decision maker, the executive body. We should be thinking on a bigger level. And I think it's hard because we get so overwhelmed with just daily stuff. Okay, so I think that's enough. I will send out the initial groups. I think you already see them here. We'll invite 2 a month for the next 4 months, 15 minutes each. I'll even time them. USBA will be one of those groups. And you'll get a little bit of notice, so you'll be able to think about something. And we'll see how it goes. And if it's not going so well, then we'll probably can it.
It'll go fine.
Or we can tweak it.
It'll be fine.
Just tweak it.
Okay, or
Doesn't
we'll
matter.
tweak it. But I want you folks to be thinking about how we can do better.
So we think about it all the time. Sorry to interrupt.
I love it. And telling us, because frequently we just hear kind of, I've talked enough. Okay, thank you.
Great idea.
All right, so I will follow up on this, and I'll CC all the other committee members on what I do here as well. Okay, we are done with 1.7.
So meetings will start at 5 in the morning? Just kidding.
We'll talk about that at the end. We're seeing how we're doing today, board member
You're
Reeve.
doing great.
We are.
I've been timing me and stuff, and Because sometimes, I'll just tell you, like, some things have taken 10 minutes, some things have taken 28 minutes. And sometimes when I see it going past 20 minutes, I'm just like, okay, we've got to wrap it up. And even if it's a good discussion, we just have too many other things we need to discuss. Okay, moving on to 1.8. Natalie.
Yes, so 1.8 is this one. 1.8 is the board development of the carry forward or spend plan for your board budget. If you remember, we talked about this a little bit yesterday in the committee meeting. You've already approved the use of the discretionary funds, so that's not an issue here. Just to bring to your attention, currently remaining in the board's carryover budget is $284,520 of state funds, $487,000 of federal mineral lease, which those have a restriction or specific use clause associated with them. The land exchange as well has restricted purposes. We've carried that land exchange money over for a couple of years. This is just an agenda item in case any members of the board have ideas or requests for expenditures or spend plans for those. We just wanted to get that in front of you so that that's something that you can consider monthly.
Mark?
Can I ask, okay if I ask Natalie a question?
Please.
We had discussion 2 months ago, and I didn't make it back to my office here in the last couple of weeks to try to find it, but and I think it's what's highlighted here, we've talked, but we didn't take any action on, well, it's not highlighted. We were gonna do something with our land exchange funds. There was something, a recommendation that Scott was talking about. Do you recall that at all?
I think he mentioned that we needed to come up with some type of a spend plan for those dollars.
But there was, okay. I'm getting blank, so I won't, I don't have any questions. But we need to be doing something. But there was something that was marked that it was very restricted, but it was a need. And it was 2 months ago.
2 months ago?
Yeah, that Scott said that we could or might.
That's what I recall the conversation was, as we talked through that the federal mineral lease funds have a restricted purpose, which is research and development, and the land exchange also is the same kind of restriction, right? Yeah. Deborah has all the detail on those, if
Okay.
you want to be reminded of
Is
what
that
those are.
okay?
So, sorry, Deborah Jacobson, Finance Director. The land grant funds, the 62,000, it's actually stated that it's for the use of the State Board of Education to be used for education research and experimentation in the use of staff facilities designed to improve the quality of education in Utah. So it's kind of broad, makes it a little difficult.
In some ways it makes it a lot easier.
Yes.
It's the question of who did.
But it is definitely centered around staff and facilities and how those affect education in Utah.
Okay, but there wasn't, you don't have any it seemed like there
We
was
don't have
something
any.
targeted, and
This is one of those funds, we're actually appropriated $236,000 a year. It's very similar to federal mineral lease. And so last year, we actually only brought in $8,000. And so this fund doesn't grow very quickly. So this has been carrying forward for a while.
well, I'm going blank, let's open, there was a project that, as I recall, I'm not prepared, so.
Brittany had an idea about holding a conference on innovation and education and using some of those funds. I thought that was Brittany Cummins, board member, Brittany Cummins, an excellent idea. I would like, I think we could do it for 10,000 or less to create just 10 criteria on what makes a healthy school, and let schools score themselves from 0 to 10 on each of those categories. And then we publish that data every year and give awards for being a healthy school. Maybe even a $500 to $1,000, little reward. I think it would just give some press to schools that are making healthy choices and make it kind of fun. Instead of an onerous, you will stop selling caffeinated sugar soda in your school, they can simply see, oh, we got a 62 on this score, and the school district right next to us got a 92. Why are they so much better than us? And starting to see that kind of stuff. So a state of Maryland has gone that route with kind of letting districts score themselves on how healthy they are and some other criteria, and it's, I think, create a positive, healthy environment. I don't know. Does that sound too crazy? Mark?
Well, no, but it would be nice if maybe our next board meeting, you can, whatever that model is, you could bring that model forward so we could have some discussion as a potential, something that we would do, and then we would make sure it fitted the criteria. And there might even be some, instead of just copying Maryland, that it might be some betterment that we might tweak it to better suit us. But I think that would be, I think that's a great idea. That's what we have to do. We start with an idea, bring it to this group, and we make a recommendation out of finance to our board, say, let's do this. And we're not having that kind of dialogue. So that's a good point.
All right, so I think you're saying that myself or board member Cummins, whoever else has a good idea, they need to bring something kind of articulate and do it. Should we have like the
Better
superintendent?
defined.
Or you even send an email to the entire board saying, we're accepting proposals from the 15 board members until, you can choose
That's
a
a
date.
good
And then we're gonna work on potentially funding them, and so come with the budget and some other things, Mark.
So before we get that far into this, it might be really good to find out on a proposal what that proposal needs to include. And we could have staff maybe help put that together of what it needs to include. It doesn't have to have 100% of the details, but it needs to have sufficient enough that it's almost like appropriating funding to go do that instead of just a proposal. Proposal can be on a piece of paper, it can be a huge PowerPoint, so you would want to give some direction, I think. If you wanted to have staff put that together. Natalie's got it.
Natalie?
I wondered if you'd be receptive to using our request for appropriation, what is the form called? That we
Yes.
sent out to him.
Yes, I know what you're
We already
talking
have a form that has performance measures attached, outcome expectations, a budget. Obviously, that probably could use a little.
The one for
refinement.
legislative requests. the
Yes,
same one.
that's the one. We could potentially write up a little set of instructions and have board members submit proposals. I don't think that they would have to identify a funding source just now. I think that if we did that and limited it to this amount, you may restrict what people might want to submit. And so if we sent that out with some available funds and people could just submit in whatever they wanted, that might actually give the Board of Education some ideas of what your legislative priorities might be next year. Because the session's almost over and we start on planning for next session as soon as this one ends. So it might be helpful to get that information out now and have people start thinking about it.
I think you're being optimistic that the session's almost over.
So 34 days.
We're only into it 11.
To try to do something.
We're gonna start counting down till 90. So to clarify, the intent of this would be to have people try to celebrate their greatness and to enhance their greatness, but with a little extra funding. Is that what we're looking to see, what best practices are or what's working in their schools so we can celebrate those things and then maybe learn from them?
Is,
Be anything.
with the proposals,
Yeah.
or, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, something like that. I mean, it's whatever the board will approve.
Uh-huh.
This is pretty
Yeah.
open-ended.
Well, in schools, we are always trying to initiate programs, and we do have funding constraints. So, when we're trying to support positive behavior, it's always nice to have a little bit of money in your pockets to reward and incentivize students or teachers. So I think this would be an exciting opportunity for people to maybe get a program off the ground and working.
And I think though, but we're probably looking for programs that affect all LEAs and not like building like the Joel Wright playground in Pleasant Grove, Utah, you know, at one school. Just an example.
Gotta be cat friendly.
It would be cat and dog friendly, and especially child friendly. Probably not adult friendly. That's okay. Okay, any further discussion on this point? No. Okay, moving on. Item 1.9. Natalie.
1.9 was actually a request that was received by one of our LEAs for staff, or for us to retain student addresses. And I believe the person making the request, Zane, I don't believe, Zane is here. Zane's the one that made the request from Ogden School District.
Okay, and so they get their addresses to see if they live within the district and stuff like that. And, I don't know, parental notices.
So, if it's all right, I'll give you a brief update as to where we are right now, and then I think that might help frame the request that's being made. About 2 to 3 years ago, there was a request. There was a request from our LEAs as part of the local replacement calculation that the Board of Education in some capacity validate the addresses of students being reported in the charter schools. We enacted that validation process. Every charter school student that is flagging a school district as their district of residence is now being validated against the voter database. And we go through that process every October when we do the October 1 head counts. Some of you may have received emails about that during this October. It went a lot better this year than it has in the past. One of the things with that process, though, is that once we get the student's address and validate that information, we don't retain that address. That was the instruction that we received from the board at the time, is that validating was fine, but the Board of Education was not going to retain those addresses, and we don't, I believe. So that, I believe, is where we're at. We don't provide those on a statewide level to our LEAs, and I think that's where the request is coming in. Is that correct?
So, yeah.
I didn't actually talk to Zane, so I don't know what his actual request is.
Let me give you a little perspective. So, I got up this morning, this report that I printed off here. These are all of the different LEAs outside of Ogden School Districts, schools that are attended by students who reside in Ogden School District. So we have 2,700 kids attending various LEAs outside of our boundaries that we know of. It's interesting to me that on this list, every school district, you've got Nebo, you've got Morgan, you have Tooele, Washington County, but not Weber County School District. I don't know why that would be.
They're doing online programs?
Huh?
They're doing online programs like Washington District? I mean,
Well, they're attending charters. They could be, for whatever reason, they're
wait, so
attending.
a student
So,
lives in Ogden, and how do they attend Washington
so if
District?
they were attending the school of residence, they would be in our school district.
Washington Online. has-
They have an online school,
So it must
well,
be
there
online.
are different reasons. But
All right.
here's the reason for the request. We're trying to put together a capital facilities plan. We have in Ogden School District 9 old elementary schools that were built in the 50s, and we're looking at trying to chip away at replacing those schools. And one of the challenges we have is we've noticed that when we open up a new school, kids come out of the woodwork, we know not from where.
Yeah.
And so as we put together our capital plan, we would like to be able to say, well, okay, if we replace this school in this neighborhood, we not only have to deal with the kids that are coming to our school that live within our boundaries, but we know that there are kids in the neighborhood who are attending other LEAs that, based on the experience we have, will come back. And so we need to be able to plan to design those buildings to accommodate the anticipated enrollment that we'll have once they get a new building. So the request was for a headless database to keep that data. We don't care about names. We're not looking to go out and, solicit people to come back to Ogden School District. That's not the point. The point is we just know that there are kids going to show up once we build a new building. We'd like to have an idea who they are and where they live. And so that was the request. We would like access to the addresses of the students who live within Ogden School District who are attending LEAs that are not Ogden School District LEAs. And just so we know where everyone lives. So right now we're in the process of updating our capital finance plan. We have our own kids and we've got them in a GIS system and we know where everyone lives and we know that this kid is going to this school but he lives in this school's boundary through a choice option that we grant, which is fine, but we would just like to be able to peg on that same GIS these 2,700 kids and where they live within the school district as we make plans. So we're not looking at it for any nefarious purpose, except we just want to know where these 2,700 kids live within our school district for capital facilities planning purposes. It's interesting for Ogden, that's, our total enrollment is just south of 12,000. So you're looking at about 20% of our students are attending other LEAs, which is probably, as a percentage of enrollment, greater than any LEA in the state, I'm guessing. But that's beside the point. We would just like to be able to get the addresses for these kids and figure out why Weber isn't on here.
Yeah, that's weird. That's strange.
Zane, is this a request from Ogden School District or from UASBO or?
So I made the
USDA?
request on behalf of Zane, but I know there are other BAs interested in the same information.
All right.
And since it's coming in every night, seems like it could be stuck out there in the cloud somewhere, but we'll be able to get it.
But what about vice versa? Would these charter schools then get access to all of your student addresses?
Well, ours are out there from what I understand.
Is that correct, Natalie?
I don't believe that they're sitting in the Utrecht system. I think that's a question that Jared and Aaron would have to answer.
Am I wrong? I think, my understanding, and if I can stand corrected, that the school district data is out there, but not the other LEAs.
Okay, well, I guess my big concern is it has to be reciprocal.
I'm fine with that.
If it's reciprocal. I guess two more things, then I'll turn it over to other board members. The more people who have data, the more likely it is to get leaked or get abused in some way.
That's why I'm suggesting it be a headless database. We don't need
Okay.
names. We're not interested in names, we're interested in grade.
Okay.
Grade and locale.
Okay. And then, the last thing is how this makes sense to me. I'm curious what the charter school folks would think of this. Is this reasonable? Is fair? I see Director Lambert. I don't know if she wants to be called up. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Jennifer Lambert, Director for the State Charter School Board. I saw this on the agenda, that is why I'm here. I was not aware of the nature of the request. I do know that recently we've been working with your privacy officer who received a request from another district asking a charter school for your addresses. So there are others that are there. Usually addresses are part of directory information, and so you could always grandma request them from the individual schools as well. I do not know if they exist at the USOE or USB database, and that would be others to answer that. That's it, kind of.
Okay, Director Lambert, do you have anything further?
No.
Okay. I think we have a few factual questions out there. Natalie, I don't know if you want to direct it, if we can find out. I mean, is this something that we could just do and give? Or does it require legislative action or substantial more budget?
I think that there's a few policy considerations that need to be discussed or evaluated again. When we had this conversation the last time, there were significant concerns about student privacy. I realize not having a name attached to it resolves some of that. However, the Board of Education receives requests from third parties all the time for this information, and right now we're able to say that we don't have it. Headless or not, it would have a head attached to it if it lived here. Parents at the LEA level have the right to opt their student out of directory information, and I am sure that our IT folks could figure out a way to carry that information forward, but creating that technology could result in a cost both here and at the LEA level. I think that the other issue was just pertaining to how we would store and maintain that information and secure that in an environment. I know we already have high security protocols, and so adding additional elements may not be huge, but that's a lot of data to maintain. And so maintaining or creating a data retention policy, a policy about what we could or would not release to third parties, depending upon who they are, those were all policy considerations that I believe the board didn't address in the last time we talked about this, because the decision was made that when the addresses were gathered from the individual SISs, we would validate them and they would get dumped. So addresses are not forwarded through U-Tracks where our LEAs have the ability to access them. Anything more technical than that is probably not me. So.
Kathleen and then Linda.
For our LEAs to have to grammar all these agencies would seem a little
I wouldn't
cumbersome.
want to have to do 36 grammar requests.
And the other part about that is that when we have a charter school, you can say you're full. I don't know how often that happens, but you can't say that as an LEA. So for us to create a situation where our district schools are not negatively impacted by this system we set up with lots of choice and lots of moving, it would be to the district's best interest to know the potential of how many students would be in their schools. I have had the impact of charter school closing and then all of a sudden infiltrating, and you have to take them immediately. So to create any safeguards we can for anything like that, like, just by building a new school, people decide, oh, I want to be in the new school instead of an older school. That happens, I've seen it. And so I think that it is, if we can accommodate this at the lowest level to establish how many kids could potentially show up to this school, because if you're in the boundaries, you cannot be denied that school, correct?
Right.
And so if you are in the boundaries and you decide to leave, that's not a problem. But if you're in the boundaries and you say, I want to go to this school, that school cannot turn you away. So now you take, you build a new school and you have a school of 800 kids. Then you build a new school and now you have 900 kids. Well, 900 kids compared to 800 kids is a huge difference. That's taking your class sizes, expanding them to a higher level because you don't have an extra room. I mean, if we knew that we had potentially 100 kids, you could build a facility that could absorb that or not absorb it. I mean, having an extra room for the sake of having an extra room is ridiculous, but having an extra room just in case you have 100 kids show up is important to know. I think that it holds the district schools harmless to have that capacity to fluctuate with the desires of our choice. We are all about choice, and I'm fine with that, but let's make sure that the choice of coming back to our districts is just as sacred as our choice to leave our districts.
Can I share an example? So we opened Newbridge Elementary, Central City, Ogden, a year and a half ago. The enrollment of the school that new school replaced was 350 students. When we opened up the new school, we basically said everyone's welcome. And when I looked at the enrollment at the start of this year, we have 75 students attending that school who actually live outside of Ogden School District boundaries. But the enrollment, and we've identified, I can't remember, like 30 kids that live within the school district whose kids are attending that school. But the enrollment of the school is now 637. So we had 200 kids show up that live within the boundaries of the school that we really couldn't anticipate. We fortunately designed the school big enough to accommodate it, but it was not something we could anticipate. And so we're looking at replacing 9 schools, like I said. Do we need to replace those 9 with 6 or 7? It would be really helpful for us to know where the kids are and how that would fit. And so however that works and whatever rules we need to play, I think this is data that would be important for all of us to have. We're not trying to get into anybody's life, we're just looking for a head count or an address. So,
Linda?
Are there other situations, Natalie, where schools need data from charters? Because it seems to me like one of the districts contacted me at the beginning of the school year and said that they were trying to get some data from a new charter and couldn't get it, and asked me to contact Jennifer and see if she could get it from them, because they were refusing to give it to them. So I'm wondering, are there other things too that this is related to?
I know when students transfer schools, oftentimes we have to move or transfer their transcripts, their IEPs. I'm sure there's other things that I'm not thinking of. And I think that happens whether they're in a district or a charter school. If they move around, their family physically moves, they have to get something from the other LEA they attended. And I believe that our LEAs respond and provide that information. I think in some cases there are statutory provisions with deadlines, and in other cases there aren't, pertaining to those things. But we don't, like with an IEP, we don't have those here at the board level. We don't maintain those. We don't.
So they've got to move them.
Right,
LEA
and
to
so
LEA.
I think it just depends on the data set that you're talking about, what we have and don't have.
And my only other question is, are there unintended consequences to this? And so I think this is something we could look at, but I think we really need to look closely to make sure that there aren't unintended consequences to giving this data. It's hard, yeah, we can't talk. To giving this data or making this data available for charters to see for districts and districts to see for charters.
Mark?
So it's been an interesting conversation, and I can remember we were close to that a couple of years ago, and the value of the addresses, and databases have improved a lot in the last couple of years. There's GIS, there's a lot of things that have improved over the last couple of years, and so I think if we were to move forward on this, maybe what we can do is not just have Ogden City School District, but UASBO weigh in on a little bit of this with our staff, and come back to us and say, here's the pros and cons of moving this particular direction, where we don't have enough storage, or we got to put more people on. Who's going to house the database? Does it have to be sized different? What attributes? I'm trying to remember all the GIS things that happen in the world. It seems like they were attributes a long time ago, where that address becomes the same, and there's all sorts of protective fields that now happen with databases that weren't in the past. The utility companies, especially on the gas utility side, have them all over the place, and a lot of consultants like my company will access and restrict certain fields, protect their sacred data. But I think it's certainly worth the conversation to have our people come back and list the pros and cons, the unintended consequences that might be there to move this forward, because we're not going to have all the answers in this particular meeting here.
I agree. Kathleen?
I was looking at data from our government. You can see who has kids, how many people live in each district, which way they vote, what their median income is. You can see all this information that doesn't have any addresses attached to it. I don't know if our systems can absorb this kind of question, but what would be the downside of saying there are 700 kids in this school area and 80 of them do not attend that school? That's not even using addresses. That's just saying 700 can go here, 80 do not. The other part about it is when we
That
all
would be
sit down.
helpful.
have, yeah, just that number, right? That's all you need. When we sit down here to think about why we're all here, it's for the good of the students. The good for the students is to have a school to attend to that has the capacity to absorb them in a safe way. To put 500 students in a school that's supposed to take 350 is not safe. And so that's another big category that we should really be thinking about. Is this safe for the kids to not have this information? Is it safe to have our kids moving into a school that is exceeding their capacity? I think just a number would be enough to say that there are potentially 90, 80, 70, 30, 10 kids who could possibly go here, because we cannot turn them away when they are in your district.
Grade would be helpful to know if we're talking about building elementary schools, or if we know those kids are going to high school. And I just would add, I appreciate what was done a couple of years to get us where we are today, because prior to that, I know that in Ogden, if you had, it wasn't unusual to find a situation where a charter had the student as coming dog from Ogden School District. If you live anywhere outside of Ogden, you live in Ogden, even if you're in Weber County School District. That's just the way it is.
And to follow
Same
up,
situation in Logan.
brand new schools with 4 reloads behind it is not, as we just read in the paper, not ideal. So I would like to help our districts avoid building reloads. I worked in a reload. I can tell you it's not an optimal situation to have your 4th graders move back and forth between a school. And I've also thought about the safety of being in a reload with this higher incidence of people coming into your schools. We have worked really hard to create safe barriers for our students. Your reloads do not have that. So when you're a reload teacher and you read in the paper that somebody came into a school and shot 5 people, I felt very threatened, and my students felt threatened. So I would like to champion that cause to make sure that all of our students are in the building, in a safe area, and that we can expand or decrease to the needs of our charter schools and our students, and in the name of choice.
All right, we have 2 more minutes for this. We did say 10 minutes. I think we're moving probably where Mark wants stated, that we'll bring this back and have our staff work on this and talk to the charter school community. So Natalie, anything along those lines?
I think the only thing that I wanted to bring up is to try to manage expectations at this point. If the decision is made to work on this and bring back policy issues, implementation issues, this is definitely not something that we could just flip a switch tomorrow and it would be resolved. So I just want to make sure that we manage everyone's expectations, that some of the technology necessary to do what you're asking we don't currently have. We have pieces and parts, but maybe not all. Last time we had this conversation, we didn't have to go down the road of making or addressing policy because we didn't gather the data. And so before we could gather the data and make that available, there would be some policy work required. And so those things are going to take a little time, and I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that next month we probably won't have the capability to do what you're asking. But we would have a better analysis of what would be required, and we could bring that back next month.
Yeah, just an update would be.
Thanks for your consideration,
Yeah.
everybody.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
We need to move on. So we have to end for sure at noon. It'd be nice to do even better. So this is the time for data and information. A couple of things I just want to bounce off this committee real quick with Natalie here. Sometimes, Natalie, we have grants below $1,000 that require, I think, more than $1,000 of staff time to follow up on both ends on the district. I think if we could ask, and this is not, something present during legislative session, but how many grants and how much time is it taking that we're administering? And I'd even defer to you and Scott to choose the cut-off level, $500, $1,000, $2,000, because I think this is another one of those things where to some extent, you guys are caught in the river, and we need to reach down and pull you out. If it is taking a whole lot of time, we ought to just say, because we'll be the bad guys. I think you feel like you have to do it all. We're not doing grants beneath $500 if they require any sort of administration or follow-up. At some point, we just have to draw a line, or we're only doing this much. Because even if it's offered by the federal government or the state, or I've heard this from BAs, that this is potentially a problem. Is this crazy talk, or is this?
So I've recently been made aware of another agency who is the administrative requirements for grants that are less than $100 or $1,000 is very extreme. We're trying to figure out how to bridge a conversation with that agency, and I recently found out that board member Reedy might be on their committee, so I need to talk to her about that. We do have a couple other grants in this building that by legislative requirement are about $500. Internally, we have a staff who's been going around and evaluating what the monitoring or the data submission requirements are, and trying to come up with a standardized policy where we wouldn't require everyone to send in every receipt for $500, or we would randomly pick a sample of 3 LEAs or something. Right now, we do have some program managers that are requesting 100% documentation for everything, and we feel like that's excessive and that needs to be changed or done on a risk assessment basis. And so that's an area that we're already heading down. I'm not sure that we'll be able to get there as quickly as you'd like, but that's something that's on our risk list that we're working on.
How about by the June board meeting, come back and report? Let's make it a discussion item.
Well, we're currently working on overall agency policies that would establish some of those thresholds, and so I think that that would be a perfect segue in that conversation.
One more thing, and I'll turn to the rest of you. I'm very curious. So President Trump shrank Bears Ears and Grand Staircase, and I've heard for years that's going to mean millions on millions of dollars for our school children. I'm very curious. You know, what is going to? I guess it's still potentially in litigation. I don't know. I guess I'd kind of like, people have asked me where and when is it going to start making a difference for our school children. So maybe we could invite David Yor or someone to come and give us, you know, what does this mean now that both monuments have been shrunk? Maybe it means nothing. I don't know. But I'm curious. I don't know why that hasn't been discussed. Mark?
Yeah, I thought what it meant, the way that it was shrunk, it freed up the checkerboard of land that we had on the school trust, and that acreage, that information has been given out, but it'd be good to get. So I guess it can come to us again or come to us in this meeting, but it'd be good to know. I don't think you're gonna have an instant answer of what did you just instantly gain this year.
Good.
Because I don't think those lands have been developed or contracts have been let or made, but certainly some potential might come, and that would be Sitla.
So does Sitla have more land now? It's been returned? I mean, so.
There should be, because it took.
Yeah.
And then it shrunk, and so it gave a bunch back.
Did it give it back in a checkerboard fashion, or just give it back straight?
I bet it came back in, we can get that information, but there's more from.
Probably Bears Ears, but the other stuff had probably already been traded out, I would imagine, from the Grand Staircase from years ago. Because
think
they
it
traded
has?
all of that, yeah, they traded all of that out.
Yeah, they started the process, but I didn't think they finished the trade.
It'd be good to know.
I'm just really curious, and it seems like, you know, billions of dollars at stake, and I haven't really heard anything, so I'm really curious, and there's this big celebration, and I'm interested in the details. What does it really mean? So, someone knows, I think, maybe not. Okay, I've talked too much. We have at least 3 or 4 more minutes. Linda?
Can I just ask a question, just because I'm new and I'm not sure? There was a bid sheet in here for tables from Jerry. I guess Jerry got a bid for us. I don't know if we're supposed to do something with that, but it was in our,
I saw that too.
it was in our documentation here, so I just wonder.
Is it improvements or?
I'm not sure what it is, but there's a lot of data here.
She's
I mean, a
got
lot
an
of
answer.
information here, so I just didn't
Natalie,
know whether we're
go
supposed to
ahead.
do something.
So we had Lorraine down here, and I think that she left. She had made a recommendation if the board was wanting to upgrade or look into, I believe this is furniture for the boardroom, right?
Oh.
What potential costs may be for that. I don't believe it's an official proposal. It was something for consideration by the committee. And so
Where is that?
it's underneath the budget item. in the
We were just
executive
talking
budget.
yesterday how bad the chairs are. Once
Right.
you sit in those for a couple of hours, your back really starts hurting. So I don't know how long they've had them, but
So-
7 years, actually. I thought I was
Only
just
7
referring to
years?
Yep.
So we can bring, if you want to review that, we can bring it back at the next month's meeting and see if you have any thoughts on approval or changes or anything like that. That was a suggestion from staff of a way to use your state carry forward funds, I believe.
Okay.
I like this, let's talk about this. We have 2 minutes. I make a motion to approve this and bring it to the full board. Sorry, Mark's looking at me with like, ah.
No, I'm not chairing.
It's not an agenda item. What is this?
It was under your agenda.
Yeah, it's
It
right
was?
here, under 1.8.
Oh,
We just missed it.
Missed it.
oh, I thought that was the funds we were gonna send in plans. Oh, to buy those things?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a great motion then. Thank you, Board Member Reeby. All in favor?
Any discussion
Aye.
to the motion? Oh.
Aye.
No.
Okay.
We don't have enough time. Aye. Okay. I'm gonna end it, let's get a motion to,
Motion to adjourn.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.